Welcome back to the Fear and Beer podcast,
where we discuss all things Halloween Horror Nights, horror movies, and just a little bit of beer.
So kill the lights, grab a cold one, and join us as we dive into this mad world we love.
I'm Nick.
I'm Seamus.
And I'm Jamie.
Like scary movies.
Uh-huh.
Here's Johnny.
It's alive! It's alive! It's alive!
You miss me.
Aren't you drinking?
I never drink. Why?
And as a reminder to all listening, if you want to help us to continue growing as a podcast, don't forget to leave us a 5-star review on whichever streaming platform you use.
To stay up to date with us and all of our episodes, be sure to follow all of our socials. You can find us on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook at Fear and Beer Pod.
Feel free to reach out to us. We love to interact with you all.
We kind of thought we'd have something to talk about. That was until Universal sent out those little care packages saying that we're going to get another Epic announcement. So tomorrow, I think they're going to be releasing more information on Epic Universe's Dark Universe. So that leads the HHN news on the back burner for now. So I'm sure we'll be back next week with something to talk about. It's kind of coming quick and heavy at this point, but we had sort of a lull. We have a down week. We're focusing last week all of our attention onto our shirt drop, which if you are not following us on any of our social media platforms, then you're somehow missing that. But we did drop 5 new t-shirts, all sort of themed up towards this year's Halloween Horror Nights, which you can purchase on our TeePublic site. That is in our link in our description for all of our socials. But we got 5 new designs, this being one of them. I don't know if you can sort of see it. That's like all of our originals on there. So you got a little reference of the birthday party, Monstros, Slaughter Cinema, Goblins, candies, birthday parties, all that stuff. We got all kinds of great stuff. Museums, really fun stuff. So shirts are on sale now. We got 5 new ones. So go check it out on our TeePublic page and support us in the fog. But with it being a down week of HHN news, there's a couple things here and there we'll touch upon. But for our main topic, we figured this would be fun to sort of step back. And Seamus pointed this out. We did this idea on our 7th ever episode. Long time ago. Almost 4 years ago at this point. With just Seamus and myself. And Jamie wasn't a part of the podcast at the time. So we haven't got her insight. But we want to dive into our top 10 favorite horror movies. We're not going to talk a lot about each movie. But we could talk about the stuff we like, why it resonates with us, why it's on our list. And I'm curious I'm kind of nervous to listen back to that episode because I'm sure it sounds horrendous, but I'm curious to see where my and Seamus's lists land now compared to then, because I'm sure we're going to have a lot of similarities, but I'm curious how much it's changed. But I got some interesting ones. I think we probably could guess each other's lists a little bit, but for the listeners that might not know us on that level, I think it's kind of gives us some good insight as to the style that we enjoy.
Mm-hmm. I'm excited for this one.
Yeah. Well, before that, let's get into some beers. I, of course, am still rocking my Shipyards. Still got a pack of these left, so I cracked that open, and that's what I'm going to be working with tonight. Jamie, did you grab anything at all?
I did not grab anything for tonight, unfortunately. I wanted to focus and have my mind right describing and trying to hype up these movies on my top 10 to try and make you and Seamus believe that they should be there.
No, I mean, that's the interesting thing with these lists is it's not you saying these are the 10 best horror movies of all time. These are just the top 10 horror movies that you enjoy.
Exactly. I remember when you guys did this episode and I was like, man, I want to do that episode with you guys.
I mean, I could probably pick at least 8 of yours.
Oh,
I think.
100%. I was just going to say, I think both of you guys could probably guess my list pretty easily. I'm definitely a creature of habit when it comes to my movies that I like.
Yeah.
Sorry, I had to grab my beer. I wasn't ready.
You're good.
I am currently drinking Coors Light.
Coors Light.
I do have another Voodoo Ranger for this episode, but this time I've got Juice Force IPA.
Ooh.
So I won't bore anybody and go into all the little details because we want to get right into like the lists. But I like Voodoo Ranger. So if you want to hear my review of the last Voodoo Ranger that I had, go back a couple episodes.
So what I'm also going to do to kind of zhuzh it up a little bit, Shipyard Pumpkinhead. Drink about this much, get that head off there, and then whip this bad boy out. butter shots. That's the good stuff.
Nick, did you have a rough day at work today?
And just top the bottle off.
He did.
I can always tell when Nick
the
had a rough
bottle
day at
off.
work.
Long day for old Nicholas.
Yeah, I believe it. Fuck the service industry. No
That
offense
is
to anybody
delicious.
that works in the service industry, but I'm glad I don't do that.
That is delicious.
Yeah.
That's the way to do the shipyard. Either that or Fireball you can put in there. Both are
Ooh.
very good.
Ooh, I've actually never done it with Fireball. That sounds
Yeah.
like something I'd be into. I hate
sounds
Fireball too,
dangerous.
which is weird.
That and putting Fireball in Angry Orchards.
Ooh.
They have, like,
I've heard that's good.
fireballs.
Yeah. That's good.
It's good stuff. So let's just hit really quickly on some of the like HHN related stuff, and then we can dive into our list and stuff like that. So there are lighting rigs up in Central Park and San Francisco, presumably for HHN. There's no way to confirm it. You can ask whoever you want, and they're not going to be like, oh yeah, they'll just be like, whatever. But those are 100% for Halloween Horror Nights. I think, I don't know if we've talked about this amongst ourselves, but it's early. It's about a month earlier than normal, but I think they want to start dressing this stuff up and kind of getting ready, because not only does it start a little bit earlier with just that extra night earlier, but also with the premium Scream event. Also, I think they kind of want to have everything set up for when people are doing those Unmasking the Horror tours. I think
Yeah.
they want the scare zones to be set up, because that's kind of part of it as well, part of the tour. When you're walking from house to house, you typically will go through some of the scare zones and talk about that. So I'm assuming that, I think they just want everything out before those start dates, which I think is like mid-August, because we talked about it being a few weeks before Horror Nights starts. I think it was like the mid-teens of August is when those 3 house Unmasking the Horror tours start. So I think that's why we're seeing this stuff up so early. But I mean, it's exciting, right? That's like the start of Horror Nights season. We're very close. We're in the middle of June. We really only have to polish off this month, suffer through July, and then suffer through most of August, and we're just there in 2.5 months. So exciting stuff. I don't think we've seen them in person yet. They got put
I
up
haven't.
pretty recently.
I honestly thought it was super early too, but then thinking about it with the earlier dates and stuff now, and I'm like, yeah, we're pretty much only 2 months away from August if you really think about it. So it definitely is exciting.
Yeah, I think it. I'm curious to hear if you guys think it's the same thing. But do you think that the earlier 3 house Unmasking the Horror tours? Now I know those are inside houses and stuff like that, but do you think that's a reason why they would maybe want scare zones done quicker, faster, and have them ready and up?
Yeah, I mean, it would make the most sense just to have everyone get like the more full experience, I guess.
Yeah, because they do tell us the stories of these scare zones as we go through them.
Because I was even trying to think about it from the one we did last year. Even though we do the 6 house and the 3 house usually, I feel like some of the tours, either one that you do, I feel like a lot of it's in the back more where they don't have the scare zone. So when you're doing a lot of those houses at the back, you're kind of going through like the back lots and stuff, so you don't get to see as much of it. But I think we went through Shipyard last year. We went through Jungle of Doom. And then I think we went through Suites at some point, but
Different year.
yeah.
Zodiac?
Or Zodiac, I'm sorry. Yeah.
Because you go through Zodiac to get to that front part.
Yeah.
Like the
so we went
exit,
through
that little side exit.
Yes. Because when we do the ones in the sound stages, they usually take us through like the inside and the back, so we don't really get to go through the front one.
Yeah, and the front one's whatever. In New York is kind of
Yeah, I was going to say it's usually, yeah.
But any other thoughts on that before we move along to the next quick little topic?
Nope.
No, sorry, I'm typing, so you guys kind of handled that one for
You're
me.
good.
I mean, honestly, I wouldn't say much different than what you already said. So yeah,
We did get another new piece of merch, another new random shirt drop. They tried to steal our thunder. They tried to drop this shirt while we were dropping our shirts. Bastards. But this one's pretty cool. It's kind of in the same vein of the first 2 shirts, really. It's that spray painty, really colorful, like, I still want to say the vibes are that Pax Sunny, Hurley, Volcom style designs where it's got a skull with a brain. It's got the Major Sweets hat. It's got a spider. It's got octopus arms kind of squirting blood out. It's got Lil Boo. It's got pumpkins. It's got a rotting pumpkin. It's got an eyeball with licorice, it looks like, coming out of it, or little like red straws, whatever those are. You got a little cockroach on the bottom. It says Halloween Horror Nights 2024. It's a lot. There's a lot going on in this shirt. The design, I really do like it. But again, it's just really interesting that we're getting these styles when it seemingly doesn't have anything to do with anything we've seen released so far.
Mm-hmm.
This might be my favorite shirt, though.
Mine too. I love it.
I think it's very new school.
Mm-hmm.
Like if you're into tattooing, like it's a very new school tattoo style design, and which is ironic for me to say because I'm not a massive new school tattoo fan. Like I would never tattoo something like that on me, but like I love the look of it for what they're going for, and it seems like it's super 90s too. It kind of gives off that like it feels like it's like 90s, maybe early 2000s.
These
You
are
know what
like
it actually reminds me of? Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, Nick, but like obviously we're kind of from a specific music scene, but it kind of gives me that feeling of all those like bubbly, goofy, like cartoony monster shirts that all the bands did. At one point, like every band had
Day to Remember, 4 Years Strong,
like,
Scary Kids, Scaring Kids.
They all had like one
Oath.
like monster shirt where it was like a bunch of like cartoony monsters with like big goopy lettering and stuff. So it kind of gives me that vibe too.
Yeah.
Same. It does. I like the design. I really don't like Lil Boo being on there. There's no reason for him to be there.
Yeah, I figured Lil Boo was the problem.
It's just such a...
He is overplayed.
Yeah, and it's just unnecessarily thrown in. Like he's on there twice technically because he's on Major Sweets' hat as well. Like he's one of the little candies, which he was in the Scare Zone and in the character design originally. So I'm fine with like that being in there, but then to just like roll out Lil Boo as like front and center of this thing when dude, it's just overplayed. I don't know. It's just I'm not buying or not buying merch because of Lil Boo, but I'm definitely not buying it specifically because it's Lil Boo. Like it's just done. Like it's just let it go. It's just a pumpkin with a stupid face. Like not that big of a deal. Don't get the hype. Never did. Not a fan. It was fun at Wicked Growth when you had to like go find him and it was like this, like Easter egg hunt. But then after that, when it just became so popularized and oversaturated, it was just sort of nonsense at that point. But is anybody getting this shirt?
I'm probably going to get it. I think this is the only like Horror Night shirt I might get, unless they come out with another one that I like better than this one. I like this one better than the other 2 or 3 they've released so far.
I'm probably going to get a couple of them. And normally, I mean, for me, I usually wait till like the end of the season when we can get them
when they're
like,
on sale.
Discount. Yeah.
Exactly.
But so usually for me, it's whatever ones that are kicking around, right? But there is the original design, the one they first dropped. I do want to get it in the acid wash look if they still have them in my size. I don't know how many they have, but I love that look of the acid wash. I probably won't get it with the black or the orange, but this one I'll probably get. I'll get this one probably too. Yeah.
Yeah. I usually don't get like the.
I have the second one with like the Japanese lettering.
Oh yeah, you did get that.
That one, yeah.
That one I really liked.
Yeah.
I liked that. I like that one a lot better than both of the other ones.
I feel like personally, I really don't get many of like the year shirts or like the event shirts in themselves, and I feel like I just usually go more towards like the IP shirts they had, like when they had Beetlejuice. I got the Beetlejuice shirt that year. I like the Stranger Things stuff when they came out with it, stuff like that. But same kind of thing. I feel like you guys have said it before too. We can only have so many black T-shirts, and I feel like the year event shirts that I have, I don't even wear. They're just kind of collectibles in my closet.
Yeah, that's when I tried to. I wish I did this earlier in my earlier years that I had gone to, and I might have to go back and try to find these and purchase them. But I like having the house shirt for every year. Like as like the 100%, I'm kind of like I'm gonna get it no matter what. Like I forget what year it was, but there was one where it just kind of sucked, and it was just I think on the font, I think on the front it just said "Never Go Alone" in like blood lettering, and then on the back was the houses.
The red one,
like,
yeah.
I was like, this one's kind of weak, but the last couple of years ones have been really good. But I kind of have to buy that one regardless. Versus this preview style merch, it's just kind of like whatever. If I like it, I'll get it. If not, no harm, no foul. But all right, let's get into the the main course of this episode, which is going to be our top 10 horror movies. So there's a couple things I'm curious if we should do.
Okay.
Do you want to do, before we get into this, do you want to throw out stuff that didn't quite make your list? Does anybody have or do you want to wait till after and talk about movies that, so do you want to show your hand a little bit by saying this isn't on my list? Or should we talk about those close ones after the fact?
When we did our original episode, we did kind of throw out some honorable mentions, ones that we really like, but they just weren't either at the time something we felt was worth being in a top 10 list, our personal top 10 list anyways. So we can probably instead of wasting 25 minutes on that, because we did spend a lot of time talking about honorable mentions.
Yeah.
If we had a couple that you really wanted to put on the list and just couldn't, move my camera just a little bit because that's kind of bright. Sorry. We could do that. That's up to you. I don't know. The whole guessing each other's list thing, I don't know. I was kind of like,
I think we know each other too well. I don't want to.
I think I know
like
you guys
the
too well.
idea of it, but if I just guess, if you gave me 5 guesses, I could guess 5 for sure on both yours. I'm sure.
Right. Plus, I cheated. I went and listened to the episode, so I kind of know what yours is.
Okay. Did you? Do you remember what mine is right now? If
off the top of my head, I know a few of them, but I don't know the whole list. No,
because I'm curious to see if mine has changed at all. I think I bet it's changed very slightly, maybe 2. But I do remember one that I had on there that I specifically left off, so it would open up a free spot for sure.
Well, so I also set a rule for myself this time. So it's going to be a little different. I mean, for the most part, my top 5 hasn't changed. So if you've listened to the original episode, sorry, my top 5 is not going to be very different. Yeah. But my bottom 5 has shifted a little bit, and I've actually added a couple new ones because what I did is the last time I think 4 of mine were all from the 2010s, and I kind of revere that decade because there was a lot of good movies that came out that decade. A lot of what I feel are really, 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 really good movies, not just personal choices. I think just overall, critically, they're pretty well received. So I went to and I created a rule for myself, and I said I don't want to add more than 2 from the same decade on this list. So I've got at least, I think, 2 new ones. All right. I've got two new movies on my list. So at least it'll be a little different for those that have already listened to the original episode, which of course was episode 7. So first of all, I have to say, if you're listening to us and you listened to episode 7 when episode 7 dropped, you guys are fucking awesome. You rock, because it means you've been hanging around and you've been listening to us bullshit for 4 years. So thank you.
So I just made a quick adjustment. I pulled one off and I swapped something out. I don't know if I am happy with the swap out, but we'll see. We'll figure it out. All right. So, did you want to do honorable mentions real quick? Run through stuff
if you want to.
Maybe didn't make your list that you thought was very close? All right.
We can just go one at a time and just give out 2 or 3 that you made. You don't have to spend a ton of time on it. You can just say, this one didn't make it, this one didn't make it.
Yeah, so I'll just kick off really quick.
Camera.
The one that I just knocked off, my number 10, and I'm very surprised I did it. Man, I don't know if I should or not. All right, we're making it official. It's off the list. The first one that was my honorable mention would be Signs, M. Night Shyamalan.
Wow, you took Signs off the list.
Yeah, I did. I just took it off. I think, I can't remember. This movie that I just added to my list at 10 was not on my list then, I don't think. And I think enough time has passed from when I saw it to now to have it move in there. And these are very fluid lists. If I did this again next week, it could very well be swapped out again. And then another one that I know I had on my list before that I took off specifically for the fact that I wanted to open up some spots. I know it's a horror movie, and I'm not conceding to the argument that it's not, but I took Jaws off my list.
Wow.
Because it would have been in the top 2, but again, I wanted these to be more of that horror, what you think of when you think of a horror movie. Jaws is still a horror movie. I am firmly in that corner, but I also know that I wanted to free up some space on my list to kind of make it a little bit fresher. So I just am moving it a little bit off of my list for right now. Mm-hmm. But is there other ones that you guys have that were very close?
Well, I mean, for me, I didn't even have these on my honorable mentions last year, and they weren't on my list. Not last year, but the last time we did this, and I figured, how do I not have these at least on my honorable mention? Because not in my top 10. Both of those is Friday the 13th, and that's any of them, any of the 8 or 9 that are there, plus Nightmare on Elm Street. Like, I feel like we talked about them, but we didn't really talk about them too much.
Yeah.
And I didn't even add any of those to my honorable mention because obviously they're classics. Like, there's no argument there. Like, they're totally a classic. They're classics in their own right, but they're just not my. They're not the best slasher in my opinion. I mean, obviously we know which slasher's on my list. That hasn't changed. But yeah, I was surprised I didn't have them either on. I didn't even have them on my honorable mentions. So. I will throw those in there. And then there was 2 that I did have in my top 10 that fell off. One of which is Get Out. I still think it's an incredible movie. I think that for what it did at the time, it was a good movie. It was really well done. And I still love that movie a lot. But because of my rules that I set for myself, I needed to drop some things off of it. And then the other one was The Invitation, which we've talked about before. Not the one that came out since the time we did the episode with that vampire or that whatever that movie was that went to like the girl went to Britain or whatever. Not that one, but the one from 2015, which kind of like what Nick was saying, it's not really a horror movie. It's more of a thriller, but it's still got a lot of horrific elements or horror elements in it that, fit really well for the movie. And it was kind of a surprising hit for me. So if it's something you haven't seen yet, you should go watch it. But yeah, those are my honorable mentions.
All right. Jamie, anything for you?
My camera's.
I do have an honorable mention.
There we go.
Actually, and it's also an M. Night Shyamalan movie that I try to hype this one up as much as I can, and it was really hard not to put this on my list, but there was a couple other ones that beat it out. But Old, I really like Old. That's a really good one.
Really?
Yeah, that's definitely yes.
I hated that movie.
I know you did.
I did not like it.
I really enjoyed Old. I thought it was really good. I thought it was a cool story concept. I liked it. I thought the ending was good. I thought I had a good payoff. It wasn't slow. Like,
I mean, at least it's something happening, but
it was good. Yeah.
Right. I have no Shyamalan on my list.
Really?
And I love him.
Yeah.
Which is funny.
Yeah.
I'm surprised you took that one off.
Signs in the Village are typically on there, and I think I constructed it a little bit differently this time.
Mm-hmm. Another one. Go ahead, Nick. Sorry.
I was going to say, is Old the only one you had, or I was going to
another one that I had that I just kicked off in my head because there was something else that needed to replace it that I should have had on there originally, and I thought of it now that I needed to, but was Alfred Hitchcock's The Birds.
Okay.
That just got booted out from its top 10, from its number 10 spot for something else. But
that's one that's a honorable mention.
For like classic like horror films like that and something from Hitchcock, I really like. Compared to Psycho, I know that's tough to say, but I feel like I prefer The Birds over Psycho. I just thought The Birds was kind of, I don't know, different for its time, and it was, I don't know. I'm not afraid of birds personally, but I know a lot of people that like birds frighten them, and I just feel like for its time it was really well done.
Yeah, I think I love that movie solely for its technical accomplishments. What they were able to accomplish in 1963 between using real birds and fake birds and
throwing dead birds at the actors,
throwing other birds, and that movie still holds up. Like, you can watch that right now and it doesn't feel cheesy. I mean, obviously it feels off its time, but at the same time, it still feels like they're taking it serious. The acting is incredible for the 60s. It's a really good movie. And Psycho is another one that's on my honorable mention. You mentioned Psycho. Again, another one that I feel like it should be in my top 10, but just couldn't quite put it in.
Yeah.
Gotta love dogs.
All right. I got a couple more I'll just kind of spit off here. So I obviously had Sixth Sense. I said I have no Shyamalan, so that's not on there. Shaun of the Dead, I was really debating getting on there just for that sort of comedy aspect. No Saw. I didn't put Saw on here.
Really? You kept Saw off of it, huh?
Yeah. Oh, so I had Saw on there last time.
Oh, yeah, you did.
Did I? Oh.
we had a very long discussion about Saw.
Oh, okay. All right. And then I have four movies that I really, really enjoy, but I think they're simply too new for me to put on there.
Yeah, and that's normal, I think.
And I have I really liked Smile, I really liked Talk to Me, and I really like X.
Yeah.
And
X would be a good choice too. I could see X being in it.
And Hubie Halloween. Just based off of rewatchability for me. So
Did you, sorry, Nick, to interrupt you, but I heard you when I was taming down the dogs. Did you really put Smile on your honorable mention?
yes,
Oh
too new for me.
Oh my God. Come
Too
on.
new
I have
for me.
I have nothing from the 2020s on my list.
Yeah, I
It's
feel
too
like I
new.
just can't. They have
Yeah,
to.
it's too
If we
new.
do this list in 4 more years,
I'm
one of
surprised you didn't
those
put it
may
on your
creep
honorable
onto it.
mention. Honestly, I'm really shocked you like that movie.
I like Smile a lot.
Well, here's the thing. The wonderful thing about an honorable mention list is that literally you could have 50 movies on it. It's
Yeah.
like when we first did this, when we did this 4 years ago, I remember I stated specifically I had like 50 or 60 movies that I had to pare down to 10.
Yeah, it's
So
tough.
like
This is tough.
that's hard to do. And these are not definitive lists. Like everyone needs to know that. Like these are our own lists that are ever changing.
Yeah.
But yeah, like because even like for me, like It Follows, I love that movie, but it's not my top 10.
Yeah.
So
And that's the interesting thing we were talking about. You know, these aren't, like we said, these aren't our top. It's not us saying these are the top 10 horror movies ever made. These are our favorite top 10 horror movies, and we have these constructs of how to make a list in our head. You know, Seamus mentioned he's limiting himself by year or decade, and I didn't limit myself by year, but I did this sort of on a rewatchability and how much do I watch this typically throughout the year. And I also added variety. I sort of viewed this top 10 as like that quintessential, you're stuck on an island and you have X amount of movies. What do you bring? I kind of did that with my list.
right, yeah.
So that there's variety on my list. So it's not just 10 slashers. Like, oh, I like slashers. I have to have, Friday
Right.
and Nightmare and Halloween and Texas and Psycho. And no, it's not. I think my list is extremely, maybe not extremely varied, but there's a good variety on here, I think. And I think I may shock a couple people, especially now that I learned that I have seemingly 3 movies that are off of my list now that were on last time, being probably Signs, Jaws, and Saw. Which is
I think
funny.
it kind of shows how fluid these lists can be. You
Yeah.
know, like it's not just like, hey, obviously, like for me, like the top 3 to 5 are pretty set in stone. Like these aren't going to change, at least as far as I can tell. But you never know. Obviously, things can happen. And I have my reasons why. So
Yeah. So let's kick this off then. Who wants to get started on their number 10?
So before we do that, do we want to do the same thing we did the last time where if like you say something and one of us has it at a later point on our list, do we hold off on really discussing it until we get to the last person that has it?
If you want to talk about the movie, like if we all want to talk about it, we can. But if it's on your list, you can say your thoughts at the time, but you don't have to show your hand. You don't have to say that it's on your list. And
Right.
talk about it later.
That's true. We can do that.
Say your
too.
piece, and
That's
then we'll
fine.
kind of get to it at that point, and you could tell us why it's at that spot for yourself.
Okay,
All right.
works for me.
So, who wants to kick us off? Number 10.
Why don't we let Jamie start? Because
All right.
she's the newest member.
So for my list, I did not really follow any parameters. These are strictly movies that I enjoy, that I've always enjoyed, that will always be on my top 10 that I would recommend to people more so. And Nick, I like how you put it 10 movies if you were stuck on an island. These are the top 10 movies that I feel like I rewatch enough that I could say that they're definitely some of my favorite horror films.
Yeah, we're going to go 10, 10, 10, 9, 9, 9, 8, 8, 8. So just do your 10 right now. Okay.
Yeah.
But at the number 10 spot, a Jordan Peele film from 2019, it's going to be Us. A film that Nick is not a huge fan of originally.
Well, famously not a fan of.
Yeah,
Hated it.
Unfortunately, because when we went to the theater to see this, he almost walked out of the theater, and I don't want to say that I didn't like this movie at first, but the more that I watched it, the more I enjoyed it, and now I could rewatch it and it has a great rewatchability. But
you didn't like it because I was just angry in the movie theater, so I ruined your viewing experience.
I think you might have ruined my experience.
That's my fault.
You did, for sure.
You did. You hurt her feelings, Nick.
You did, but that's okay. But after seeing The House 2 when they had it at Horror Nights, it was just so well done, and I'm glad that you got to appreciate it a little bit more in that sense. But just the story that they follow, I thought was very interesting. The thought of having like a doppelganger somewhere in this underground existent world of parallel to ours is just really creepy in a sense with how they shot it too. It didn't have to be it still had good kills in it, but not over the top gore to make it kind of goofy. It did have the comedy aspect in it that worked. That wasn't too over the top, because sometimes I don't like too much comedy in horror movies. I feel like it kind of takes away from that scary aspect, and I feel like it definitely like made you think in a way that maybe this could happen in real life. And I like when movies are like that.
Well, that's the beauty of
Yeah.
It's the beauty of a Jordan Peele movie is that he taps at a very very basic fear in people,
Right.
and it's a lot of like they call it social horror is the thing, I guess, but it's true. I mean, it definitely it takes a lot of extraordinary situations, like fantastical situations, and grounds them and makes it feel real. Like it makes you almost feel like this could happen. Like this could actually happen. Like for some reason, like an entire doppelganger family could attack us. Even though it sounds crazy, but you never know. He does a really good job of making that feel a certain way. So Us is not my favorite Jordan Peele movie. I don't hate it like Nick does. So
Jamie can attest to this. I've given it multiple shots. She's come home and I've tried and I've had it on the TV, and she's like, "Why are you watching this?" I was like, "I want to enjoy this. I love Us up until the doppelgangers open their mouth."
Personally, I liked it better than Get Out. I thought Get Out was very boring for me.
That to me is
Very
crazy,
boring.
because I feel like Get Out is his best movie by
And
far.
a lot of people think that, and I think it's good. I didn't hate it. I just personally didn't find it that interesting. I feel like, and I like in Us too, he uses a lot of different like Easter eggs from like horror movies like he enjoys, or like classic movies that were like, for instance, with The Lost Boys was shot at the same boardwalk. I really like that. He does like references to The Shining, I want to say, and to when it's like panning over some of like the VHSs, like in the beach house, you could see like Chud. That's like one of his like favorite movies. I just like little stuff like that too. It adds to it for me. So
no, I get
my
it.
number 10 spot is Us, Jordan Peele's 2019 film.
So that's a good little segue. I'll jump in to give my 10 because my 10 is Get Out, Jordan Peele.
Oh,
so he snuck onto the list. That was my one I just swapped out for Signs. I flipped Signs for Get Out.
Okay.
I think at the time that we recorded this the first time, it was probably just new on the scene, or it was still in that too new
Within
to
a
rank
couple of
category.
years, 3 years.
So for me,
you did
I just
say that like you really liked it, but you wanted to
sit on
kind
it.
of keep the list a little bit.
Yeah, so
less
this could
new.
continue to climb. It could continue to climb. What a way to bust on the scene. Like, just kind of out of left field. It was, Jordan Peele's making a horror movie. That's interesting. Let's see what this is about. And it was just this weird Twilight Zone-y, very grounded, very could happen sort of thing. And then it took a real left turn into that whole different aspect. Like, it is not just the auctioning off of the people. It's you're bidding to cocoon their bodies, essentially. But I just thought the acting in it was phenomenal. The cinematography is really cool. The sound work was brilliant. And I think it's deserving to be in the top 10. And it gives me that weird social horror that was sort of missing from the rest of my list. So I put Get Out at number 10, which is interesting that Jamie's got Jordan Peele, and Seamus said Get Out dropped off his list this time around.
Yeah. I mean, it's still like a 10.5 for me. Like it's still in the top 10. It should be in the top 10, but because I set the rules for me, that's why it's not.
Yeah, I can't 5 minutes ago, this would have been Signs. That's how much it changes for me.
I can't lie though, because in Get Out, the probably the scariest scene in the movie is where the guy's like running directly at him when it's dark outside at nighttime, running at him through the house, and then he makes like the quick like sharp turn. That was scary.
Yeah,
I mean, it's like. Go ahead.
I say it's not inherently scary. It's not a jumpy, scary movie. It's definitely more of that psychological horror,
which I love, and I definitely have a couple of those on my list too. But that part was really cool.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. That whole movie, it's got a lot of spots where it's not like outwardly horrific, and you can even kind of like say that maybe you saw some of it coming, but I think there was just a lot of aspects to it that you're like, oh, I didn't expect him to go that way or go this way, or it zigged when it zagged, or whatever you want to say. But all right, so that means on to my number 10. Okay, so this is one of the two new ones on my list from the last time we did this exercise, and it is Candyman from 1992, the first one. One that I didn't actually mention, I don't think is an honorable last time we did this episode, and I feel like that was a criminal thing for me to do, is not at least mention it, because the Candyman is it's To me, it's probably low key one of, or if not the best Clive Barker adaptation. Now, you guys both know that I'm a pretty big Clive Barker fan. Everything he's ever, not, I don't say everything he's ever done. A lot of what he's done, I'm a big fan of. He doesn't have as many like adaptations. He's not like the Stephen King of America, which obviously, that's what Stephen King is. He's a little less known. I think there's a lot of movies that you don't realize are Barker adaptations until you find out through the grapevine that, hey, this was based on a short story, which is this one is based on a short story. But I really do dig this movie. It's got that like early 90s thing about it. But it also still seems incredibly relevant to today, even if it is 32 years old now at this point. It's still incredibly relevant, and the leads are really good actors. We don't even really get Candyman until the end of the movie. You only get him for like, I think 10 to 12 minutes, but he has such staying power as a character that when you think of the movie Candyman, you obviously think of Candyman himself. You think of Tony Todd and that deep voice and, stay with me and be immortal. Like you just that whole, like, it's so iconic. Like you don't forget that. And even the not the remake, but like the pseudo sequel that they released not that long ago, a couple of years ago. Even that one is really good. And there were a lot of different things that they did with it, but it's still called back to the original movie in a lot of ways. So I love this movie. And I think that it deserves a spot on the top 10 list. Especially considering because of the rule. I didn't really have a ton of 90s horror on my list originally. I think I had maybe one movie. Yeah, I have one movie on here that was from the 90s. So I figured I probably should throw some more love to the 90s. But yeah, I love Candyman.
Candyman, I feel like there's a handful of characters in horror that are sort of forgotten about as like that second Mount Rushmore. With the Mount Rushmore, obviously you have Michael, Freddy, Jason, and then you could either say Ghostface or Leatherface. Like one of those. That's your top four. But then you have that second Mount Rushmore of like Pinhead, Candyman, Chucky, and then either Leatherface or Ghostface, whichever one doesn't make it to the first one. And they sort of get forgotten about. Candyman, I think, is rightfully up there in the top slashers, and it's just it does sort of get forgotten about a little bit. And credit where credit's due. It's a great movie.
Yeah, and I think it's because like he's not your just typical, 80s slasher. He's more iconic for really the actor. Clearly Tony Todd is phenomenal, and he's just so well known. But you're right. I think he's just kind of someone that you don't really think about initially or immediately when you think icons of the horror genre. He's just not the first person you think of. But when you start talking about deep cuts and movies that really stick with you, you think Candyman, and the minute when you think Candyman, you think of the bees and the voice and the hook. It just there's so many things about him that it's just so memorable and iconic. So yeah.
All right, Jamie, let's go. We'll keep this order going.
All right. So at number 9, I have a John Carpenter film from 1988. I chose They Live.
Knew that was on the list.
Yeah.
Wow.
Funny
I'm really excited we're doing this with you because your list is definitely going to be like,
it's very, very.
This is not in a bad way, like different. Like it's going to be a lot different than what I think him and I would typically do.
Yeah.
It's a good movie. I like They Live. Yeah.
It is. And I'd always seen like the different, not promos and stuff for it, but different merchandise for it, like the Obey signs and different stuff like that. At Atomic Horror, they had like the little setup for it and stuff like that. And I was like, damn, I've never seen They Lived. And probably within the last year and a half, I watched it, and I've probably watched it like over a dozen times now because I really enjoyed it. It's just it kind of goes back to with how Jordan Peele movies are. I feel like it's such a simple concept that we could still incorporate today with how aliens live among us and they're disguised as the humans and trying to take over and overdo the corporate and following in line. And I just think it's really cool. The character designs of the aliens are cool for the time. I feel like it's with John Carpenter, I feel like everyone usually knows him for Halloween, which is also definitely going to be on my list at some point too, probably. Just one of my favorite slashers too. But I feel like he's done so many other good movies too that don't get recognized as much. I'm glad that they are getting bigger now, but I feel like that's generally what usually people gravitate towards too. But I feel like it's a really good movie. Rowdy Roddy Piper, R.I.P. I love him in this. He's great. The soundtrack in this is great as well, obviously, with anything that John Carpenter does. And yeah, it originally, I was thinking about it too, because I had a pretty set list when you guys had talked about wanting to do this for the episode. I was like, oh, I already know exactly what I'm going to have on there. And this definitely had to be on there. So even for being an older movie, but me for having seen it more recently, I could definitely say it still holds up.
I will say that, funny enough, I'm forgetting his last name, but Keith, the lead from one of the other leads from They Live. What is his name? Keith.
The guy, I know who you're talking about.
Oh, what is his name? Jamie, help me here. Keith.
I know. I should know his name. What?
Well, either way, he's going to be present on this in this video a couple of times. Keith David. Good God.
Yes, I was just going to say.
Good God. Seamus, what's wrong with you?
Forgot Meg was in this too.
He's so good. But he will come up again in this list. Let's just put it that way.
Okay.
But yeah, I do love They Live. It's a really good movie. That fight scene is so insane and ridiculous.
It's like an almost 10-minute fight scene. I was going to say it's like an 8-minute fight scene too, and it's
it's so dumb, but it's amazing at the same time. It's so good.
And when the cops come from, he's like, "You get back from me now!" And he's like, the blind, and he's trying to fight him off, and he's like, "You guys get back from me now! You're good, man!" And they just start beating up the poor blind guy. And it's such a ridiculous movie, and I wouldn't consider
it's an insane movie.
I wouldn't consider it horror per se, but it does have the horror elements to it. It is John Carpenter, yada yada yada. You get it, but I feel like you could argue with that for a couple movies I have on here, so I hope you think they're still okay to be on the list, because I feel like they're kind of on the verge of horror and psychological thriller, maybe. But
well, let's just say it gave us one of the greatest pop culture quotes of at least contemporary times, and that is, "I'm here to kick ass and chew bubblegum, and I'm all out of gum." So good. Literally amazing. Good. And it's in Duke Nukem too. That's a Duke Nukem quote.
And that's
I feel like a lot more people know the quote than know what it's from.
Oh yeah, I had no idea that came from that movie.
And that's exactly my point too, because I had heard that quote so much, and I was like, what the fuck is this quote from? Excuse my language. And it was from They Live, and I was like, I really gotta watch this movie. And I was like, now I know what I've been missing out on, and it is good. Yeah.
All right, so I'll jump into my number 9. My number 9 is Killer Clowns from Outer Space.
Nice.
I needed some sort of comedy relief on there.
Mm-hmm.
It's such a rewatchable. We just watched it the other night. We just had it on. It's just so goofy. It's so ridiculous. You know, the Kyoto brothers did an amazing job with it. The character designs are so fun. It's just, it kind of just snowballed into this huge successful thing that was never supposed to be. You know, it was the little engine that could. This wasn't going to be this big mainstream movie, and somehow it fought its way from, you know, the video rental store shelves into the pop culture zeitgeist that it is now, where it's just, you see Killer Clowns merch all over the place, where
everywhere.
When you saw this movie when it came out, the reception, everything like that, this thing was buried. It was dead in the water. There's no way it was supposed to be as successful as it is. And I'm just glad that it fought through and got to the success that it deserves.
Yeah, it's funny how certain things just kind of bubble to the top eventually and become like cult classics. And this is just like one of those, like Donnie Darko, same idea. Like a movie that has just kind of come, you know, over the years has built a cult following, and you're not really sure why or how. Like with this movie with Killer Clowns, it is just so incredibly goofy and over the top and so B movie, but there's something about it that is just timeless, I guess, in a way, or it will never not be fun to watch. And it's a movie that like you can watch with your kids or your grandkids eventually and say like, you know, I grew up with this. Now you get to enjoy it. And every generation will find something to like from it, even though it is the most insane, crazy, you know, plot line. And they don't make movies like that anymore. You don't get goofy, funny horror B movie, you know, B grade movies anymore. Like, you don't really get that anymore. It's of that time. It's very 80s, 70s, 80s, and you just don't see it as much. So it is kind of fun to go back and watch some of these movies and, you know, see how they've aged and even still say somewhat relevant. I mean, because Nick just said, like, it's amazing how it's completely come back into the zeitgeist. It's a movie. I'm sorry, it's a video game.
Yep.
Right? You've been talking about it for the last like week,
I
2
love it.
weeks. Is a video game based on it, which is wild. But
Even with having it at Horror Nights as a scare zone, then having it as a house, and even like at Spirit Halloween now, like the Killer Clown Birch is one of the first things that like always goes now. Like people just snag it up, like even the costumes,
Yeah.
the little like collectibles and stuff that they have. But it's good. I'm glad it's getting the recognition that it's getting.
Yeah, it's just such a weird time capsule movie. Like if you put this thing in a time capsule and in 100 years, this was one of the movies you showed people, they'd be like, "Well, I just don't get it." Like that. You're not supposed to get it. It's just, it is what it is. It's as ridiculous as it sounds. The title tells you everything you need to know. Killer Clowns from Outer Space. Where do we go from here? That's it. That's all you need to know. It just fits in that weird little category with like, Attack of the, what are those huge the tomato
Killer
things?
Tomatoes.
Killer Tomatoes, Frankenhooker. It's in that same vein where it's so outrageous that that's really all you need to know about it.
Definitely a good one to have on the list.
Yeah, so I think it's very deserving to be there, and that's sort of like that fills the void of that like 80s comedy for me. So that's where my number 9 is right now. So Seamus, what do you have at 9?
All right, so number 9. This is the second of the 2 new movies on my list.
All right.
So 2 things fell off. These kind of settled into their place. And this is the second of my 2000s horror movies. And it's American Psycho.
Nice.
So not the original Psycho. This is the it's just American Psycho, which is obviously based on Bret Ellis Easton. I think it's his name, or Easton Ellis. I forget. I don't know how his 2 names go. Bret Easton Ellis or Ellis Easton, whatever it is. But so it's based on a book, clearly. But kind of like how I was talking about with Candyman, you want to talk about obviously not the first level of characters that you think of when you think horror, but definitely on that second level with Candyman and Pinhead, you think of Norman Bateman. You think of the various references that you have to the original Psycho movie. And sorry for the door slamming, because people know that I'm recording, but they do it anyways. But it has its moments. Obviously, this is one of those movies where people will look at you and go, "That's not a horror movie." There's this horrific elements to it, but it's not a horror movie. It's more of a thriller, more of a, not a parody, but like a cultural takedown of culture of the time. Or either way, it does a really good job of lampooning culture of the 90s and the 2000s, especially when it comes to violence. I think that how much we've become desensitized to it, especially with what's shown in movies and TV shows, especially even kid shows now. It's so very desensitized to things like that. And it kind of lampoons that a little bit, and how violence can go so unnoticed. And I whacked my mic this time too. So I'm sorry for those listening. It lampoons people's obsession with violence or indifference to violence in a lot of ways. Because the whole time you're watching this movie, you're asking yourself, is he imagining this? Is he slowly going crazy and he's imagining all these things that he's doing? Or is he actually doing it and everyone around him is just so clueless to it happening because of, the desensitization of violence in the culture of America, or American culture. But it's still a great movie. It's one of the best deconstructions of that thought, or of that philosophical idea, or that just the deconstruction of American culture in the 2000s, in the 90s and 2000s. And it is very memorable. And there's a lot of scenes in that movie that you think back on, and or lines from the movie that you think back on. And you go, man, like, where did I hear that before? And then you realize, oh, it's American Psycho, but it still sticks with people. Like the scene where he breaks down the oh my God, Huey Lewis and the News song. And he talks about how like Huey Lewis and the News, this, that, and the other, and how it's like, pop this and pop that. And then, in the meantime, he is dancing to it, and he cuts Paul's head off with an axe. It's a very iconic scene. It's like one of the most iconic scenes definitely in 2000s movies, like from the 2000s on, but in horror or thrillers in general. Plus, I mean, Ice Nine Kills did a song about it, so you obviously know that it's relevant in some ways. But I do love this movie. It's one of those movies, like Nick was saying, like you go back to and watch all the time. This is kind of like my horror Shawshank in a way. Like if it's on, not that many people watch TV anymore, but I have to watch this movie quite a bit, especially during the Halloween season. But I watch this just regularly, and I go back to it quite a bit because I just think it's a great movie. Plus Christian Bale in it is phenomenal.
Insane.
Christian Bale being Christian Bale. But yeah, I just think this movie is totally worth, if you haven't watched it, watching it, because you really are missing out if you don't at least watch it once. Granted, it is a violent movie, so you have to be prepared for that, but no more violent than anything you may have seen in any other slasher.
Yeah. All right, Jamie, you're number 8.
All right, I didn't even realize we were already at number 8 for me. Let me pull this little list back up. So it's funny that so with this one, I kind of had it back to back with the other ones, but I think it kind of went above it. So at my number 8 spot is a film from 2007, and it's going to also be, which I know how Shane is saying he was trying to go by the year, but these next 2 films I have are both going to be from 2007. Just a great year for movies. Dead Silence is going at my number 8 spot, which I was thinking with how much I enjoy this movie, I was going to have it a little bit higher up on my list, but I feel like this is a good spot for it. Kind of same thing. I watch this fairly often. Every now and again, I watched it the other day again. It just, for having killer doll movies, you have Puppet Master, Dead Silence, you have Chucky, if you want to consider that, and stuff like that. Goosebumps, you got Slappy. But I just feel like something is always sat right with me with Dead Silence. When this had first came out when I was younger, and I remember seeing this, I used to thought it was really, really scary. I thought it was creepy. I thought it was cool. And I was still kind of getting into horror at that point in my life because I was probably like 2007, 10, 11 years old at that point. So I was still kind of getting into it. And that's the year that I went to horror nights, and I was like, oh man, Dead Silence, they're going to have it as a house. I'm really excited because I like the movie. And I feel like that's kind of what made me appreciate it more, seeing it at such a young age and seeing it presented to me like that in a house at an event that I enjoyed, even though I was terrified as a kid and I thought I was never going to go back. I feel like I've just always had such like a good connection with it, and it's just over the years I could still sit and watch it and enjoy it. And honestly, the puppetry work that they have in it and the different twists that were in the movie just always, I don't know, it just always worked really well for me, and I've always liked this movie. I've always said that out of all the killer doll movies and whatnot, that this is probably my number 1.
It's a little low. I thought it was going to be higher on your list.
Yeah, I didn't see that.
I knew it was going to be on there. I just thought it was going to be a little higher.
I know. The other one from 2007 that I have for my number 7 had to go above it just because of how much I enjoy that one too. But I feel like this is just going to be me talking about how much I like all these movies. But no, honestly, it is a good movie. And I feel like I've seen more talks about Dead Silence now, even after it's been so many years. I'm pretty sure it was one of James Wan's first or one of his earlier movies. And it's just nice to see how his evolution of horror has evolved with his movies and stuff like that too.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. All right, so we'll jump over to my number 8. I believe this was on my list last time around. I just don't know where. And that is Paranormal Activity. I love this movie. I love this franchise.
Yes, you do.
I know it's not the best, and I know they definitely catered to the whole jump scary stuff, but it didn't feel for me as forced as some of these other horror movies that throw them in just like willy-nilly. Like, it makes sense for the movie that they're making, the jump scare being something slamming. Okay, well, it makes sense because in this movie they're filming their house because they think it's haunted. I get it. That makes sense. I think what puts this into my top 10 for me is going back to the time that I was in when I first saw this and how this movie was marketed and released. This was a very small movie. And back in the day, you had to go onto the website to vote for your city to get a showing of this movie.
I remember that.
So you had to go on, and then it slowly trickled out until it was a complete nationwide rollout. But we got to see this, in a midnight release. And as soon as we saw the first one, we were hooked. It was like the most terrifying thing, in a theater experience where the sound is booming and the silence is deafening. Like, it's just, it was Blair Witch Project brought into the new age, and it was just better technology, such a simple story, and I love when simple stories actually nail it out of the park because it can go awry so easily and turn into an absolute disaster. This one did not for me. And I know a lot of people don't like this series and don't like this movie, but for me, I love this series and I love this movie. I don't really think there is particularly a bad one. Some are better than others, but I enjoy all of them. I really do. I don't care. I know that they're not the best and I know they're very repetitive, but I don't care. Could care less. I enjoy them. This is typically a kickoff of the horror season marathon for me.
Mm-hmm.
Usually I just
They're
tear
definitely of their time.
Yes.
You know, at a point where like, you know, ghost hunting shows were a big deal. And that's why it was so popular, is because you can thank Zach Bagans for that movie being so popular, because if it wasn't for Ghost Hunters and Ghost Adventures and all the other ghost shows that they still make to this day, paranormal activity wouldn't be nearly as popular. But the idea of setting up a camera in your bedroom and then a demon stalks your wife and throws her against the wall and turns into a fucking demon monster, I mean, that wouldn't be a thing if it wasn't for those Ghost Hunter shows. Because it makes you feel like, oh, this could actually happen.
And the acting in it is so well done for them being like.
It actually wasn't. Yeah, the first one was pretty
for
good.
nobodies. Yeah, for
not being a big name. Yeah, it was great. I mean, the budget.
Mika?
I know, that's all I could think of when I hear it. And the budget for it was so low, and it ended up doing so well. And honestly, I like the Paranormal Activity movies too. Not as much as you do, Nick, but even the other ones that they came out with, I still like them too. Like, I think it was the marked ones. I really liked that one.
Yeah, the one in
Mexico. That one was cool. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, they got progressively more franchisey, which means they got a little bit more crazy and over the top. But the first one for me is still holds a place in my heart. So I do watch that.
It's a classic.
Not regularly, but at least watch it once during the holiday season. Plus, you know, my kids are getting older now where they can start to watch some of this stuff. So I can't wait to make my children watch this movie and have
Colin,
and that's one that
Colin
like
is
you
gonna
can kind of
psycho.
And you can kind of
want to do horror nights. Well, you watch the movie and get nightmares then. Let's
like
go.
This one you can sort of show to younger people because it's not like gory. There's not.
No, it's not. It's just
nudity
spooky.
And swearing. It's scary.
It's just a scary, spooky movie.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So that's my number 8. So Seamus, what do you have?
My number 8, and this is where we kind of get back into like the movies that were on my list the last time, but they have moved a little bit. Some of these, this one's dropped a couple spots from the last list, but it is still on my list, and that is The Babadook from 2014. This movie is just still incredible. Again, we like to joke on this podcast how there are Seamus movies, there are Nick movies, and now clearly there are Jamie movies too. And this is obviously a Seamus movie because it is more about the horrors of A, parenthood, B, single parenthood, and C, having a psycho kid who clearly is just grating. And I know I say that in jest.
Can't
like
you just
this,
be normal?
there's so much better like words to use, and I obviously don't mean I obviously don't mean it.
I love the Babadook
in a bad way. I love this movie. I think it's great. I love the Babadook character. I love the folklore that they create in this book about it.
Mm-hmm.
I love the way that the story is written, and I mean, I'm not gonna lie to you. This is one of those movies that kept me up at night the first couple of times I watched it, because it's definitely like go to bed at night, watch this movie in the dark on your iPad or whatever, or watch it and then go, lie awake in your bedroom and you just think the Babadook in the corner of your bedroom in the dark, and it is creepy, genuinely creepy, and I think this movie still stands up and will stand up for years to come.
Mm-hmm.
So another one of those movies that like surprising number of people haven't seen, and you should go watch it if you haven't seen it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. All right, Jamie, number 7.
Number 7, back to 2007 again, because like I said, I didn't really have any parameters to this one. I just picked movies that I really enjoyed. You guys have known from listening to some of these episodes, possibly, maybe you don't, now you'll do, that I really enjoy anthology horror movies. Really, really enjoy little mashup movies, and especially when they all tie in together. And I know collectively we all enjoy this one. It's going to be Trick or Treat at my number 7.
Ooh, good pick.
Yes. I feel like this is one of those movies that me and both Nick alike always watch during the Halloween season, always around that time to get us into the spooky spirit. But even when it's not Halloween, I feel like this is like, man, we haven't watched Trick or Treat in a while. Like, we should probably watch Trick or Treat, just pop it on. But like I was saying with the anthology, I feel like I like when anthology series, they connect together in the sense that within the different stories, you can still pick up on what's happening with the other ones, like kind of how they do with Trick or Treat. Like when the girls are driving by in the car on the first one, they're driving by the house with the bus driver being connected, being the old man who's living in the house, connected to the principal who's the neighbor. I just love when stuff has a good payoff like that. It just reminds me of like classic like Halloween when I was a kid, like storybook like Halloween tales kind of. And I just feel like it's always a fun watch. It's definitely not horror per se, but it still has the scary elements, but definitely had to be on
Oh,
the
it's
list at
horror.
some
I mean,
point.
it's definitely
Yeah,
horror.
I mean,
Yeah, it's a horror
well,
movie.
yeah, so
No,
But I
I
do
love
like-
the anthology aspect. I love the
Yeah.
Halloween vibes. I love the comic book vibes. Like, this movie is amazing. I love this movie.
But you're right about one thing. I like how it's an anthology, but it's all tied together.
yeah.
It's not like one of those anthologies where it's like you have a host, like Tales from the Crypt, where it's like, oh, now this movie, or like Creep Show. Like Creep Show is great, but I would prefer something like Trick or Treat, where they kind of flow together.
Yeah.
It's not, here's this character introducing all of these different stories. These are different characters that are living amongst each other, but they're obviously experiencing their own, part of a movie or part of Halloween night. And it kind of goes in like throughout the night, right? Like it starts like at one point earlier in the night, and then it kind of as the night goes on, as Halloween night goes on, it kind of goes through that. And then Sam kind of ties everything together anyways.
Yep.
If you think about it.
And I feel like the same thing with Trick or Treat, kind of like with Killer Clowns too. I feel like it's just gotten like so popular within like the recent years too, just with like merch
Yeah.
opportunities for it. And like same thing, it was at Horror Nights and at the house in the scares. Did Trick or Treat have a house or was it just a scare zone? Because I didn't
Both.
get
It
to
did the
see
same
it.
thing.
It was
went
both.
from
Yeah.
Scare Zone to house.
Because I didn't get to see it when it was the house, but I did for the scare zone. But even with that, and same thing with Spirit Halloween, always have a bunch of Trick or Treat stuff. It usually always sells out. So same thing with it. I'm glad all these kind of older movies, I mean, for Killer Clowns, it was
Well-
80s, 90s, and now early 2000s. So nice.
For those
Nice.
on the YouTube,
Yeah.
I know it's backwards, but that's one of my posters. So
But
I am
yeah,
a fan.
Trick or Treat will always be a favorite of mine for sure. I was gonna say, Nick, are you looking? We have ours in there
I
somewhere.
was looking for my poster.
Yeah.
I thought I had one. I have up there. I have a film reel with Sam's face painted on it.
Mhm.
I have a Trick or Treat lunch box. I have the Sam lollipop, and I have like a
I
wooden.
actually do have. Hold on.
From
Now that we're
Spirit.
playing, now that
Right?
we're playing this game,
Ooh, show and tell. And yeah, same thing. Most of this, I think
I
we
got
got that
this
for the
cool
lunchbox
guy
from
right
Spirit. Oh yeah,
I have this guy.
little figurine guy right there.
Whee!
No, I do love Trick or Treat, and then wow, it's just a classic. It really is.
It
So.
is.
Number 7 on my list. I think this might shock people, and I'm curious how high I had this last time. But number 7 is going to be Halloween 3: Season of the Witch.
Wow, I was afraid you were gonna say it. Not afraid, but wow, I'm shocked. I
Yeah.
thought that was at least gonna be your top 5.
Yeah, it's. I think
it's
it
not in my
probably.
top 10 at all.
No,
I love the
Really?
movie.
okay.
Wow.
Yeah, different Halloween in my list.
My
Huh.
tail end. My Season of the Witch.
Oh my god! Sorry,
And-
Nick. Continue.
Season of the Witch and Killer Clowns are sort of in that bottom part to kind of round it out and have it that feel goody, just fun throwaway movie. Just kind of pop it on, zone out, and enjoy. I love the movie. It's just so different. It's not Halloween. It's its own thing. So I just enjoy that factor. I like the story itself. It's such a ridiculous, fun 80s time capsule. Like you put this on and it's just like I know when this movie came out and it's just brilliant. I don't know. It didn't get enough credit when it came out, and I'm glad that much like we're talking about with Killer Clowns and Trick or Treat, it's had this resurgence and people appreciate it finally for what it is.
And you got to meet some of the cast too.
I was looking at I have the framed picture. I'll grab that while you guys discuss.
I'm
Yeah, no,
surprised
I mean,
you don't have it
and-
on your list, Seamus. Wow.
Well, we're talking top 10 of all time, and I love that movie, but at the same time, there are just 9 other non-sequels that will never not be something that I,
Mhm.
wouldn't include. Like, I love Halloween 3, but is it enough to put it over, other ones that I have on
Something,
here?
right.
It
Yeah, I got
probably isn't.
my Tales of Silver Shamrock
Woo!
poster framed and signed. Got
Very nice.
Tommy Lee Wallace's autograph,
Mhm.
Tom Atkins, Stacy. The main three signed this thing right there at
They were all
Spokala.
so nice too.
Yeah, they were super super cool. They were
Mhm.
there to talk.
Well, because they're like blown away that people are still showing up to them.
I know.
Have shit signed for, it probably
Well,
blows them away.
especially
Like, you guys
after, like-
care about this stuff?
Right.
especially like 30 years after the fact, right? Like it's really
Yeah.
taken off the
Right,
last.
exactly.
So that's my number 7. So Seamus,
Nice.
where's your number 7?
My number 7 is my other 90s movie. This is the other one that I think people would look at you and go, well, that's not really a horror movie, isn't it? But I don't care. It's my list, not yours. And that is Silence of the Lambs from 1991. Hannibal Lecter at his finest. It's such another movie where, yeah, you may say, well, it's not really a horror movie, but there are horrific elements to it that are genuinely terrifying, and it's grounded in real world. This is shit that happens in the real world, maybe not so much today, but it did at the time and years prior to that, where women would be abducted and murdered just because. And there was, this is probably one of those movies that kind of like hit home for a lot of people because they were either living in an area where Richard Ramirez was murdering people, or the Green River Killer was murdering people, or Kodiak, killer. Like, this serial killing is a terrible thing, but it's also very real and it's very scary. So to make a movie based on a cannibalistic serial killer, at the time, and granted, it was, again, there's a theme here if you haven't noticed. It's another one based on a book. So obviously, Seamus happens to like his book into movie adaptations. But again, this is also one of those books into movies that kind of exists in a specific place where you could read the book and watch the movie and like both of them for different reasons. And it's not one of those arguments where, well, the book's better than the movie's better than the book. And for all the ones on my list, you can't have that argument. Like, the book is really good for its own reasons, and the movie's really good for its own reasons. And this is another one of those situations. But I love this movie. Anthony Hopkins is terrifying in this movie. In every scene he's in, he steals the scene. Jodie Foster, kind of like really her first, I don't want to say it's her first big role, but like her big breakout role. I mean, maybe I'm wrong. Someone could explain to me that I'm wrong, but I still think this is like, when you think Jodie Foster, this is the first movie you think of. You think of the scene in the jail cell, in the jail, the first time she's talking to him behind that glass, and he does the whole like thing, and the fava beams and Chianti or whatever. Like, that's such just a sticking point. It's something you think about. You watch it once, you'll never forget that scene. It's terrifying. It's a genuinely terrifying movie, and there's just so many things about it that I think warrant it being on many a top 10 list. Even like the some of the stuff that was taken from this movie and then not reused, but like inspired a lot of things from other movies. Like, I don't know. It's just really good. I don't know. I'm kind of speechless a little bit because like it surprises me how many people don't like this movie or like don't hold it in such a high regard as I do. But
I've never seen it.
You've never seen it? It's worth watching. It's a hard watch. It doesn't pull punches. It's not incredibly gory. There are gory aspects to it, but it's not like one of those movies where you're like, oh, there's so much blood. Like there's blood, there's gore, but there's not as much as you would think. The scary parts about this movie is, again, the real world scenarios, the characters, because obviously I've talked about Anthony Hopkins being really terrifying, but Buffalo Bill is also terrifying in his own right. I mean, there's a lot of things about that character, the person they're hunting down, the FBI is trying to find. He's equally as terrifying as Anthony Hopkins is. but it's worth a watch.
I do have to watch it. I've been meaning to watch it for a while now.
If nothing else, you don't have to watch the other sequels and adaptations and spin-offs. Like a lot of the other ones, like Hannibal and the Red Dragon and the Hannibal TV show, all good in their own ways. But this movie is really like the start of it, and really for most people, it just needs to be the end of it, because it's just, to me, it's the best movie in the franchise. And it kind of does sneak up on you. You don't realize how scary it truly is till you watch it the first time. And I remember my parents had this on VHS, and I think, again, a lot of these things that I discovered as a kid was because my parents had it in some capacity, and eventually they were just like, whatever, do whatever you want, watch whatever you want, read whatever you want. And that's how I was exposed to Stephen King at 6 or 7 years old, or I was exposed to Silence of the Lambs as a 13-year-old kid.
And it's really,
what's this movie?
It's not just a good horror movie. I mean, this is the only. I think this is the only horror movie to win Best Picture at the Oscars.
It is something like that.
Is
Yeah,
it really?
it's something weird.
Because it won Best Picture
or something.
Wow, that's
but
cool.
nothing else is what, horror movies have. They obviously get a bad rap at Oscars, but like they throw some dog shit award at you, like, oh well, and here's Best Supporting Actress, or best screenplay, or
best
effects,
sound, or something along those,
editing, whatever. But it won Best Picture, so like,
right.
That just speaks volumes.
It just speaks to how good of a movie it is. Yeah.
Yep. All right. So Jamie, number 6.
Number 6 is going to be another John Carpenter film, the more well-known ones. It's going to be the 1978 Halloween. Seamus, I know you love this one.
5
I know.
or 6?
6.
Jamie, what are you doing to me?
I know. But I feel like this movie is like the epitome of Halloween time movies for me. Growing up as a kid and like going trick-or-treating with my parents, coming home, it would be like 9 o'clock at night. Halloween would be playing like on cable TV, and just that soundtrack and that music just always like really made me feel like that Halloween spirit. And I know it's different for you guys up there because you guys, exactly. Thank you, Nick, for the background tunes. And I know you guys got to experience more of the seasons there with like fall and stuff like that, which was really nice. But down here, I feel like as a kid, it was like harder to really get that good, like cool Halloween spooky feeling, because it was like 80 degrees outside and we'd be trick-or-treating, sweating like in costumes and stuff. But like I feel like Halloween was that one movie that like always made me feel like that like spooky feeling, or like that Halloween nostalgic feeling. It even still makes me feel like that to this day. And just like I remember my dad, like when I was a kid, had like a Michael Myers mask and would like go outside and like tap on my window and like try to scare me. And I just have always like really like fond memories of this movie. So I feel like, and speaking, you guys know, everyone knows from this episode, I love Mikey. He's my favorite slasher. He'll always hold a special place in my heart. So it didn't make my top 5, but it was number 6. But I feel like my top 5, just with the movies that that I've told you guys now, I feel like you could guess my top 5 pretty easily. I've been kind of saving a couple back-to-back hard hitters.
Well, I'm not surprised I could.
Yeah.
I don't know if I could guess it. This being at 6, I don't know if I could guess your top 5. I know at least 1 or 2 that are probably in your top 5.
You've already mentioned, just talking about other movies, like you've already mentioned like 2 or 3 of them.
Yeah. I believe it. But yeah, 6. Wow. This is again, to me it's low, but that's just me, and we'll explain why eventually.
And it was really, I just wanted to say, it was really, really tough, because I knew you guys would have talked mad shit if I would have put Rob Zombie's Halloween on here, because it was really hard to do. Instead of putting
terrible.
Instead of putting it over the
Nick would talk shit. Nick would talk shit. I would respect
instead of putting it over the original, because honestly,
you can't put it over the original.
Over the original, you'd be hostile.
No, exactly. I know. I had to think about it, though, and I'm like, realistically. But then I was like, I can't put both Halloweens on there, so I was like, I got to pick the original. But I love honorable mention for sure. I love Rob Zombie.
You can only have so many dumb redneck horror movies in your top 10, Jamie, and I think another one's coming.
Jamie, it's your list. You can do whatever you want with it.
Just like I said, you guys, for those of you listening, these are movies that I personally enjoy. I know that usually I don't have the same taste as everyone else, and I tend to like not that great of movies, but they make me happy.
We've talked about it before, and then this is just speaking to your experiences. I mean, you're younger than we are. I mean, you're 8 years younger than me, so you grew up when that Halloween remake came out. You were what, 12?
Yeah, just
11,
about.
12 years
Yeah.
old. I was
that
in
was
college.
your Halloween, essentially.
So like for me, like it was a cool remake, but I had grown up with the 78 one. Not grown up in the sense like I was alive when it was made, but when I was a kid, like
That's
that
all we
was one of
watched.
those horror movies that was always on a Halloween.
Yep.
And like
Even
you
for
said,
me
watch
too,
the
though, when I was
marathons
younger.
all day long, 24 hours
yeah,
on AMC.
yeah, right. And like Michael's been my slasher since I was a kid. Like he was Halloween. Whenever I thought of Halloween, like the holiday, I was thinking da-na-na-na-na, and like that
Exactly.
movie. Because that mask is iconic.
It is
You'll
iconic.
never forget it. That movie is great and iconic and will never be topped by almost everything.
Mhm.
Yeah. So my number 6, I'm going to kill 2 birds with 1 stone here. This was definitely
Rob
on my
Zombie's
list.
Halloween.
Yeah, no, this was definitely Rob Zombie's Halloween. This was definitely on my list last time. I just don't remember where, but
I'm sure it is.
Freddy versus Jason.
Wait, hold on. I don't believe. Oh, yes, maybe it would have been. Maybe it was.
I think so. It's got it.
I think
must
it's
have been.
higher than it was the last time because the last time I think
Okay.
it was like 10 or it was 9 or 10 on your
I thought that
Okay,
was.
all right.
I thought it was going to
So
be
it's gone
higher.
up.
All right, so I gave it a little bump up. Yeah, I mean, I love the slashers. I love them. But for me, kind of like how we just talked about with Jamie being like Halloween was sort of in her area when she was release date when she was younger. That's Freddy versus Jason. I had watched the other movies, but because I got to go see this in theaters, when I was like 13 or whenever this came out, 2003, 2004, because I got to see this like as a new movie.
I have this movie ticket.
It was, mine's got to be somewhere, but it was just, it holds a special place. I know it's a very bad movie. I know this is a very of its time movie. There's a lot of stuff said and done in this movie that in today's current standards and culture would not be deemed appropriate, but it is what it is. This thing, it pulls no punches. It is 2 of the biggest slashers going head to head in a absolute ridiculous situation. It's Robert Englund still putting on a masterclass on how to act in a horror movie. And it's got the effects that just, I think, work. It's true to both of their stories. You get the camp setting, you get the really cool nightmare aspect. It's just, as much as I love Nightmare on Elm Street and Friday the 13th and stuff like that, I will spoil it. Neither of those movies are in my top 5. And they probably could have been. I could have shifted stuff around, but again, because I said I sort of wanted to have a varying factor here, I didn't want to just unload on slashers, and because of how much I love Freddy versus Jason, I didn't want to include those as well and sort of take up 3 spots instead of 1 spot. So Freddy versus Jason on the outside looking in of my top 5. Oh, Seamus, you're number 6.
Keep banging my microphone. I'm over here digging through all my stack of movie tickets because I'm pretty sure I have that movie ticket.
Yeah.
I've got 2 for Paranormal Activity.
Oh,
I can't read it, but
Lemonster
these tickets are from like
the same
2010.
Mine's
I've got
all
a ton of them.
framed up. Mine's framed up.
But well, I think not to get off topic, but I got to do that. I got to get a frame and frame some of these. But yeah, so my number 6 though is another 2010s movie, later 2010s, and again one of those movies that really has stuck with me. And again, I'll say it once more. This is definitely a Seamus film. We know how these go, but it's Hereditary. From 2018.
I knew that was gonna be there somewhere.
That movie is fucking amazing. Toni Collette should have won an award for this movie. If she didn't, she definitely didn't win an Oscar or an Academy Award for it. And it's a criminal act, and people should be put in jail for not giving her an award for this movie because she is, holy crap, like she is just phenomenal. Like that movie is so good, and it's not just her, but she is definitely like the driving force of that movie, and it's just so uncomfortable and unsettling. And again, maybe there's a theme here, but like the deconstruction of the American family and making everything about having a family horrific and being a parent horrific. But I love that movie. It's so good.
I love Alex Wolff too. He's such a good actor.
I
like him.
I think another theme on my list is I think that was his big break. Like that was the first real big movie he was in, big, that kind of made a name for him. But he just a great job.
He broke his
I
nose
love-
for that desk scene too, and like everyone
See,
talks about that now. That's
He
like
did.
commitment to the role.
But yeah, it's just a good movie. The pivotal scene in that movie where nobody sees it coming until it happens because they're totally focusing on one character for the first like 45 minutes, and you think that, oh, like this is going to be about this person, but in reality it's about this person, and boom, oh, holy shit, what just happened? Like that movie's just amazing. Like Hereditary is probably, and people may fight with me on this, and you guys may fight with me on this, it is the best movie since, it's the best horror movie made within the last 20 years. Or one of the best
Really?
one of the best horror movies in the last 20
I'd
years.
say
yeah.
one of. I
that's a
mean,
bo- that's a
you
bold
could
statement.
justify that's one of. I mean, I'd say Get
I
Out
think
is
it
in
is.
there as well
Get Out's definitely in there,
in the discussion.
but I feel like just as just like a straight up like horror thriller. I don't know.
It's
There's just
right?
so
That
many things
new
about this
age
movie.
A24 style of horror. It's just this.
It
they
is.
found a way to
it totally
pivot
is.
and make the
It is.
genre relevant again. We've seen it
They
time and
should've
time
just-
again. Like
They should have just
with
called it
horror.
Seamus 24 instead of A24.
Like horror has gone through so many shifts where it was just like that super slasher fest in the 80s, and then 90s got really meta. And then the early 2000s was really like that demon exorcism stuff. We had a lot of like Exorcism of Emily Rose, and we sort of tailed into the Paranormal Activity stuff. And then now we're getting sort of that new age, what they call essentially elevated horror, I guess, is where they're essentially trying to make a good movie horrific versus just making a horror movie. But either way, so let's crack into our top 5. Jamie, number 5, what do you got?
Rounding out my top 5 is going to be. Oop, my mic almost fell over. Sorry if that connection sounded bad. But rounding out my top 5 is going to be, in my opinion, one of the best vampire films of all time, and it's going to be Joel Schumacher's The Lost Boys.
Yeah, I figured that was on there somewhere.
It definitely had to be on there. I just same thing with this one. I could just never get enough of it. I could watch it all the time, even when I was before I moved out, when I was living at my parents' house and stuff like that. My mom's like, "You're watching The Lost Boys again?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I am." I just feel like Kiefer Sutherland, Jason Patrick, Corey Haim, Corey Feldman. It's just so it's sad to see them like in one of these movies together, being so young and stuff like that. But it just has such a stacked cast. It's just such a classic 80s vampire. Nice, Seamus.
Sorry, to continue.
No. Kind of the same thing. It's just like I don't even have the words to say with how much I enjoy this film. And then back in February, me and Nick, we took a trip to California and we got to visit the boardwalk in Santa Cruz where they shot this movie. And it was just so overwhelming and so amazing for me just to be there where they filmed it. And with this movie being such like a big part, not of like who I am and like, but I feel like this is just the epitome of one of those movies that like defines me like as a person. Like I could feel like if someone's like, "Oh, what's a good horror movie I should watch?" I'm like The Lost Boys. I just feel like it has vampires. It has the cheesy 80 kids making out the top of the hill getting lifted up in the air by vampires and killed. It has a little bit of something for everyone. And I just can never get enough of it.
That's a good pick. I don't hate it. Of vampire movies, it's not the one I would go to, but I do like that movie.
I feel like it kind of steers away from more of the classic Bram Stoker's Dracula or like Nosferatu, stuff like that. I feel like it made me see vampires in a different light, that I just think it just made them look so cool and like badass that I feel like it's just why I really liked it.
Dracula, it's not the prim and proper, elegant vampire.
Yes.
It's like, oh, okay, this is a new spin on it.
Yeah.
All right. So my number 5, we're gonna crack into another slasher. Weird, I know, right? But you're welcome. I combined 2 into the previous one. So number 5 for me is Scream. It's just such a classic whodunit. Even though I don't want to say it ruins it after you've seen it the first time, because you kind of know what's going on, but it's still, there's still substance there. Like if you forget about it and you can kind of turn your brain off a little bit, you can still play a little game of the whodunit. But this was a game changer. We just talked about how horror pivoted and switched up, and this is just a classic case of Wes Craven switching the game up and completely, rejuvenating the slasher and horror genre in the 90s, because it was kind of flatlined a little bit. Horror flatlined and the slashers came up, and then it sort of stalled out because it got oversaturated with slashers. The 90s sort of pivoted from that, and then Wes Craven took a new angle on it. It was like, well, let's make a slasher, but let's make it really meta. Let's add a whodunit. Let's add a mystery to it. Let's have a great cast of like amazing actors and actresses. I mean, this cast is still doing great things today, and the franchise is still turning out movies for better or for worse. But this is one of the franchises that I really don't think has a down point. Everyone's down point in this series is Scream 3, and that's kind of like one of my favorites. I know it's probably the worst one from a movie standpoint, but I really enjoyed 3 as well because it was just so ridiculous. But each movie is kind of its own thing. They tie into the lore, but as a whole, the franchise never got too tiring. So for that factor alone, the whodunit, the rejuvenation of the genre, Scream is my number 5. And then Seamus, what's your number 5 at? What broke into your top 5?
I'm all over the place tonight. I love Scream. So my number 5, this is where I kind of things don't change for me. This is, so if you've listened to the original episode, you can tune me out for the next 5 picks, because this is the same thing as it was the last time, and I'm not changing for nobody.
Well, my number 5. Hell, I recorded the episode and I don't even know where they are. So
this is true. So my number 5 is the second oldest movie on my list. I like to call it a slasher in space, and it's Alien.
Okay. Yep.
From 1979. This movie's incredible. Again, another movie where there are just so many iconic scenes and iconic moments that you just stick with you from the first time you see it to the last. And it's just, again, it's another movie that holds up incredibly well for a movie that is now 45 years old, I think, this year. It is incredibly haunting, scary. I mean, at the time, I don't think they had done too many space horror movies. So like, it's definitely sci-fi, but in a lot of ways it's horror. So people that say that, well, it's more of a sci-fi movie, sure, but it is literally a slasher movie with an alien as the bad guy, because the alien can't be seen. It's stalking the human characters. And it's just such a good movie. It's such a well-made movie. And if you haven't seen Alien, what are you doing with yourself? You need to go see that movie as soon as you can. But it is an incredible movie. Another one that I watch routinely, as these two have stated. Like, there's certain movies that they go and watch every year. This movie, I have to watch it at least once during the Halloween season, and I probably watch it once or twice throughout the year as well, just because it stands up so well. And again, the scene where the first time you see the birth of an alien, like it's holy crap, like that completely out of nowhere, still takes you by surprise, even if you know it's coming. Like it's still so iconic. And I love about that scene too, is that like the story is that they didn't tell any of the actors it was going to happen. The only people that knew it was going to happen was, William Hurt. I think it's William Hurt. I think it's his name. It's something Hurt. Only him and the director are the only two that really, like, and the effects guys, like they knew that was what was coming. None of the other actors knew it was coming. So a lot of those reactions you get in the scene are actual reactions to the effect happening. But I love that movie. Alien is incredible. And I don't know, like, I know that there's a lot of younger people in the community, especially we have a lot of younger listeners. Like, if you haven't watched Alien from 1979, do me a favor and go watch that, please. Even if it's not doing yourself a favor, just do me as your humble podcast host, an elder. Please go watch that movie.
Don't worry, guys. I haven't watched it, so it looks like I gotta watch it.
You haven't watched this one either?
No.
Hey, what are you doing?
List and make her watch these movies.
Holy! All right, well, hold on.
You guys know I'm not that into sci-fi. The Alien movies never really intrigued me.
No.
Never really intrigued me.
I have this on Blu-ray. Mm-hmm. Y'all coming over the house one night?
I have them on. I have all of them.
All right, so you're coming over the house. We're gonna get some drinks, and you're gonna sit down and watch this movie, Jamie.
How long is it?
I'm gonna hold you to it. You're gonna do it.
Oh,
If
you don't
it's-
have
if
to
it's
worry about
over-
how long it is. It's a good.
If it's over
a
2
movie.
hours, I can't. I don't have the attention.
No.
It's a movie.
I do.
None
I
of
do
that.
have to watch it. I know it's
None of that.
It's a classic. It's just I've never
You
been into
sat
the
through that
alien
movie
stuff.
last night. You're gonna sit through Alien.
Oh God, yeah, we did, and I didn't fall asleep at the theater.
All right, Jamie, number 4.
This one was tough. So for my number 4, I kind of switched it around before we started the episode, but at my number 4, I have the 2012 gem of a film, still one of the scariest films that I've probably seen to this day in quite some time, is going to be Scott Derrickson's Sinister with my dog, Ethan Hawke. When Sinister first came out in 2012, I saw this in the movie theater, and even like back then, I didn't go to the movie theaters too often, definitely not as much as Nick, and didn't enjoy it as much. I really liked just watching movies at home when it would come out on DVD and whatnot. But seeing this at the theater and seeing this at home and getting that experience for the first time in a theater, I was literally so scared to even like put my feet on the ground, thinking something was going to like come and grab me. Just the storyline that they followed in it with Oswald being the author and kind of falling off and trying to find that like one good story to kind of get him back like on the scene. I really like that story that they followed. James Ranson is great in this too, and it's nice to see him in some other stuff now with Ethan Hawke and done by Scott Derrickson. The soundtrack in this is great. Scott Derrickson always has that kind of like synthesized, weird, like funky soundtrack. He did one of the segments in VHS 89, I want to say as well. I always get it confused with the other one, but that was very similar in it that I like too. But just the same thing with kind of the anthology films that they had within this movie and the different ones, like the barbecue, the pool. Give me one second.
The dog was whining in the background. I could hear
I can hear him whining.
But
I'm
I
really
mean,
excited to talk
Sinister
about
is-
it. And I was going to say, and I'm really excited to talk about this movie, so we need to stop whining. But yeah, just the character design of Bagul. Bagul is so creepy. I love that he has that story behind him with the occultist theme and the eater of children, and that he kind of had more of a backstory than to just kind of being this like spooky character that he saw in the bottom of the pool. And I'll just never forget one of my favorite scenes in this movie too is the lawnmower scene was probably one of the scariest ways to die and like ways that they could have shot this film, because it was in complete silence, and then as soon as they get up to the faces with the body with a lawnmower, it just cuts in and out with a sound. And then when Ethan Hawke is watching on the screen watching the pool video and he's going back and he has the kind of screenshot of Bagul's face popped up on the screen and he's turned away and his face kind of like pans off the screen and looks at him off the screen. It's just the little things that they did with this movie made it so scary, and they didn't have to do it over the top for it to be genuinely like make you feel like creeped out. And they ended up making the second one after it. I didn't like the second one as much as I did the first one, but it was definitely still pretty good. But even with like the scores on like Rotten Tomatoes and like IMDb and stuff like that, it's gotten really good reviews. I think it's still like on the list of like top how people's like heart rates raised for like horror movies and stuff like that, and being one of the scarier movies.
Yeah,
I don't
officially
know,
the
but
scariest horror movie.
it's something like that. Yeah, but I'm glad that this is one of those films that I really enjoy and I really hold it like to high standards, and that other people like it too. So Sinister has my number 4 spot.
It's
This is a great movie.
Yeah.
It's a movie that I'm surprised didn't spawn more sequels. You know, they just did 2.
Me too.
Like the second
Yeah.
one, it was just kind of that was it. I figured
Yeah.
they would have kind of like Insidious.
like
and
the second one
Conjuring,
was-
like
The second one sufficiently bombed enough that I think
Mhm.
they were like, all right,
Yeah.
we have
It's
other
just
things
like,
we can
if
work
you-
on.
go back to the drawing board. You know, there's a lot you could redo this time and time again. It set itself up perfectly to have multiple sequels without it getting.
I'm kind
know,
of glad that it
redundant and
didn't
boring.
though.
Yeah, I'm
Just-
happy it didn't either.
Just because the first
I
one
mean-
was so good, and like even though the second one was kind of that like it wasn't as great, but still kind of cool scenes and stuff like that. But it was just
I'm
one
all
of
for
those-
sequels. Like if you can do it right and do it good, I'm not gonna shy away from
No.
them just because I don't want it to ruin. Because look at Insidious, look at The Conjuring. Like it's
and not all
as
of them
long
are
as you do
great.
quality movies, they're good. It's fine. Like you're gonna have
Yeah.
some bad ones, but
He
I'd
likes
rather
all the
have-
paranormal activities.
I know, and
Yeah,
all the
but, like,
paranormal
I'd
activity.
rather
All
have-
the paranormal
I'd rather have
activities.
3 good paranormal activities and 2 bad ones versus just one good
Mhm.
one and be like, well, I guess I'll
I
watch
don't
the
know.
same one again.
I don't know. I like having variety in my life as much as it doesn't seem like it, but
I do like
I
having
do.
variety too, but when it's something like this, and I feel like it's such like an original storyline, I feel like you could only go so much after it. Like obviously, like Bagul does have like more of a character, and it did lend well to have a sequel. But like for after the second one, it didn't really lend to have like any more come about after that.
Yeah, I hate when people try to like over explain lore. Like I don't
Yeah,
need to know all about Bagul's background. I just need to know that this is what he was. This is very quickly what we got in the first movie was more than enough. Plus the snuff film esque kill scenes were the best part about it. And
amazing.
I remember I remember buying that movie on Blu-ray, bringing it home, and of course, I'm the only person in the house that watches horror movies, especially at the time, because 2012 was what 12 years ago at this point. Um, I put it on, and the very first scene with the tree branch and the saw and the family of four, like I was like,
It's so eerie.
this is what I'm in for. All right, let's go.
It sets
Yeah,
the
that
tone
movie
so
is.
well.
Yeah, that movie is it's genuinely terrifying.
Yeah.
A lot of really good achieved jump scares
Mhm.
that I've bad dogged so many jump scares in my lifetime that
Mhm.
it's nice to have a few movies that actually do it right and do it the
Mhm.
right way. But the movie's great,
Mhm.
phenomenal movie.
And Ethan
All right.
Hawke, man, if you ever listen to this, just know how much I I really adore you. I think you're great.
Jamie is a fan.
Big fan. But no, he was great in this too. I can never hype this movie enough. Go ahead, Nick. Sorry.
Well, I was gonna say I was gonna jump into my number 4.
Go ahead.
My number 4, maybe this was on there last time, I'm not sure, but that is something that I literally just mentioned. That is The Conjuring. I think it's just so well done.
Yeah, you
Classic
included it.
haunted house done right. Again, this isn't, when we're talking about sequels and stuff like that, this is something that lends itself well because it's just case by case. It's not taking one good story and just stretching it way too thin. It is its own story, its own story, its own story. So it's more of that anthology style. But I mean, the scares in this thing were bar none. You have when she's looking at like the little spinning mirror dial and the kid jumps behind you, well deserved jump scare. I mean, the classic when they're playing the hide and seek game and the hands come out and it's just so
Scary.
chilling. Like haunted house movies are done so far, like just all the time. They've been done a million times. They're gonna be done a million times over, and it's very easy to get these wrong. But they did this one so right that for that reason, it's in that top 4 for me because I needed another little haunted house kind of deal because this is more entities than it is like Paranormal Activity. It's just kind of like a demon. This is like weird, like possession entity kind of deal. So I had to have something like that in my top 5, and Conjuring, I think it's well deserving for that. So Seamus, you're number 4.
I was just gonna say, I feel like you guys can appreciate a good haunted house too, with living up north and the homes being older and having basements.
100
and
years
all
old.
That
that
movie's
too.
based in Connecticut.
Yeah.
So-
Pretty much, it's the same. It's the Amityville
Exactly.
house.
Yep.
Mhm. Yeah, so my number 4, same as the last time, it is Saw from 2004.
Nice.
I love this
there,
movie, and again, I'm not going to dwell a ton on it because we've talked about it a million times. People know what this movie is. For me, it's just how well they get you at the end of it. I mean, I think for me, what
No one
sticks
saw
the
that coming.
most is the twist. Is nobody saw it coming. Nobody did. Anyone that says to you, "Oh, I definitely saw that coming," is lying to you. They didn't see it coming. It's so well done. It's proof that James Wan and Lee Winnell are masters of their craft. So you obviously picked The Conjuring, one of James Wan's finest achievements. This movie, I think, is his best achievement. This movie put them on the map and said, hey, these aren't guys that you can mess with. They know how to make a great twisting thriller horror movie. They use gore effectively, not egregiously. And it's just something that sticks with you even 20 years now on. I mean, this movie came out 20 years ago, which is wild to think about, but
and they're still making them.
I mean, Yeah, and they're still making them, I guess. I don't know
And
why.
so-
I mean,
For what it's worth out there, that's probably the second best Saw movie they've ever made.
which one? Jigsaw?
No, the Saw X, the newest one that came
Oh,
out.
I don't think I've even seen Saw X yet. Maybe I did. I don't know. Which is the one with Chris Rock? Was that the last one?
That was Book of Saw. Or
Okay,
Book
so
of
I haven't
Jigsaw
seen.
or something like that.
I haven't seen X yet. Is X
So
good?
The
I'll have to watch it.
the newest one, it brings back Kramer and everything like that.
All right, I'll have to watch it then.
It takes place in between like 1 and 2 or something like that.
Oh,
but
okay. Well, whatever. I'll have to give it a shot.
It is probably the second best Saw movie, if not the second, then probably the third best. Because number one is obviously Saw, but it's just so well done as a movie, and it's not as outrageous and like gore porny as 3, 4, 5.
Which
6,
is what
whatever.
I mean. Unfortunately, which is what the series kind of became. So, like, unfortunately, like I think Saw kind of gets dragged down by how bad the sequels are, and not to say that all the sequels are bad. This is the problem that I have with a lot of sequels and franchises, is that eventually the sequels just get so over the top or so full of themselves that it ruins the what made the series so great. And this is kind of what was happening with Saw. After like Saw 2, they kind of went down a toilet. But Saw 1, I mean, for the most part, better than half the movies filmed in one room. Mm-hmm. And
it's an escape room.
It's two dudes, and it's really good. It builds suspense well, and it catches you off guard at every turn. Like every turn, you're like, oh no, and then finally at the end with the music, the da-na-na, da-na-na. I love that movie. That movie will always live in my heart, and I will watch this movie every Halloween or every year until the day I die. I love Saw. The movie is it's incredible. And it honestly, it would have been higher in this list, but the three that I have in my top 3 will never be topped. So
it's just one of those things too, where you say Saw and people are like, oh, that gory movie. It's like, well, Saw really wasn't that gory. Like the sequels, it was all the torture trap stuff, but like Saw 1, there really wasn't
post Hostel.
Yeah.
Really. If you think about it, like Saw came out, then Hostel came out, and then all the Saws had to be like as worse than Hostel.
Off, yeah. So, all right, let's get into our top 3s. Jamie, number 3.
Top 3.
Drum roll.
I know. Rounding out my top 3.
I know these 3.
It Follows is definitely in here, isn't it?
This is it's got to be at some point, because these are probably, compared to like The Lost Boys, these are probably like the top 3 movies I talk about the most out of like any other movie.
I guess now that you say that, before you reveal. The fact that Lost Boys is not in your top 3 intrigues me. So I want to see where you go with this.
Tough. But I feel like how you said, Seamus, these movies just can't be topped for me. They just had to be up there. So coming in at number 3, we have Rob Zombie's House of Thousand Corpses. Had to be on there. Had to be.
I get it.
This.
Oh, you were gonna say Halloween. I was like, oh, come on, we just talked about this.
No. I wouldn't put 2 Halloweens on there. But Rob had to be on there at some point. I thought about doing The Devil's Rejects, but House of Thousand Corpses and speaking of sequels and stuff like that, I feel like the trilogy of House of Thousand Corpses, The Devil's Rejects, and 3 from Hell works very, very well together. I feel like they go so well. Rest in peace to Sid Haig, because it would have been nice to see him more in 3 from Hell, and it was sad to not him have as big as a part and stuff like that. And I feel like this is one of those movies too, when I was younger, I was always into Rob Zombie's music and White Zombie with my dad growing up listening to him. When I found out he started making horror movies, like I said, this was kind of the age where I started getting 9, 10, 11 years old, really getting into horror. And my mom and dad had went to the theater to see this movie. And I'm like, dang, I want to see a Rob Zombie movie. I love him. How cool. And then they got it on DVD. And my mom was like, you are never watching that. And I feel like I've told this story before. Long story short, they finally let me watch the movie. And I was like, holy hell, what did I just watch? Like, as like a 11, 12-year-old kid, I was like, this is the craziest thing I've ever seen in my entire life. And now I've probably watched it dozens and dozens of times. Just the soundtrack, the way that Rob Zombie's mind, how he just thought of something just so over the top and crazy redneck hillbilly horror, Texas Chainsaw Massacre vibes, just the weird cannibalistic kind of family that lives in the middle of nowhere. It's just always that like trope has just always been very creepy for me in general, and very like eerie to me. And even though I've always like preached that I don't really like comedy and horror movies, I feel like the comedy gave this kind of a relief because it does get pretty gruesome with some of the kills and some of the scenes, and just thinking of like how and like what they endured, it just made you I don't know, it's just a really weird movie. And just the casting that they had for this, like you have Rainn Wilson, you have Sherry Moon Zombie, which is our first time really seeing her in one of his films or really anything other than her dancing that she did for him and stuff like that. But it's just same thing, I'm kind of just rambling on, but I just love this movie. It'll always hold up for me, and it'll always hold a special place in my heart for sure.
Yeah, and and ironically, Rob Zombie's from Hamilton, Massachusetts, of all places.
He is
so,
from, I was gonna say he is from Massachusetts.
Hamilton or Haverhill, maybe it's Haverhill. It's one of the two, but he's from our neck of the woods. So y'all, so you were watching him down here in Florida. He's from Massachusetts. But yeah, no, that movie's really good. I didn't have any of them in my top 10 because I just don't have as big of an endearment to that hillbilly horror thing. Like I like it.
I love it.
It's fun. It's a fun movie. But not enough for me to be like, you know, it's not incredibly rewatchable for me. Like I'll watch it every once in a while. And I saw Devil's Rejects in the theaters. But again, those movies never really like, it just never stuck with me as much as I guess the others, as other things have.
Which is fair too, because I know his movies sometimes really aren't everyone's cup of tea. It really is that specific like genre niche that people have to like to, I feel, to like fully enjoy them. But I just thought it was really good storytelling for a story that really didn't have much to go off of. We thought it was kind of be like this one-off, and then he ended up making 2 other sequels to it, other movies in the time like Lords of Salem and 31, which are also really good movies too. And yeah. Go ahead, Seamus. You're fine.
No, sorry. No, this is your list. So
I was just gonna say it's just really cool to see how his mind works, coming from like his musical aspect and incorporating in the music into his films and stuff like that. I just feel like it goes really hand in hand together, and like obviously for having it at Horror Nights, like that was the epitome of everything for me, was having House of 1,000 Corpses at Horror Nights. So
yeah, movie, and I agree. Yeah. I think that he has a style and a voice, and he uses that style and voice, and it's different from a lot of things that are out there. So I respect him for that. I respect him for like sticking to his guns and basically saying, this is what I do. This is my lane. I stay in my lane. And I respect him for that, because I like the Lords of Salem. I thought that movie was actually really good. I know a lot of people don't like that one. That's one of the few that
I liked it too.
But I dug the story. I liked where it was going, and I guess partially because I'm from Mass, so it's like I have that, you know, being so close to Salem. You know, I grew up with that history, but yeah, I do enjoy that. Plus, with this movie, we got Rainn Wilson in a horror movie, so I guess it's kind of cool too.
And we a lot of
Dwight Schrute.
I know, right? And a lot of production companies originally didn't like want to pick up this movie because of like it was supposed to have like an NC-19 rating or NC-17 rating or whatever. It was supposed to be NC-17.
Yeah.
And everyone just thought it wasn't going to do well, and it was going to flop, and it was going to be kind of so over the top and gory. But I feel like that's kind of, I know we've said that about multiple movies now, but I feel like all these like one-off kind of like culty horror movies are really like coming back now. And I just feel like it's one of those movies that you can show someone, and it's just really enjoyable after they watch it for them to be like, what the hell did I just watch? Like, I just love getting that reaction. It's good. It's definitely one of those weird movies that I guess you wouldn't expect to be your typical horror movie that would become as popular as it has.
Yeah, it's definitely got a cult. It's got a cult following for sure.
All right. Yeah, I mean, those aren't really my cup of tea too much. I enjoy House of 1,000 Corpses, but other than that, it doesn't really do too much for me.
Was there truly 1,000 corpses in that house, though?
In the lower depths of the catacombs where Dr. Satan lives, the walls were lined.
It's such a weird part of that movie. It just kind of came out of nowhere.
Satan.
Yeah, sure. Number 3 on my list would be, I believe it's 2017. It, the first It of the remakes, not the original like TV miniseries, but the remake. It kind of captured the same vibes of Stranger Things when that came out. You know, it just kind of recreated that 80s feel.
Had one of the Stranger Things in Stranger
Finn
in
Wolfhard was in that.
Yeah, Finn Wolfhard was in it. Yep.
Which is crazy that he went from Stranger Things to It to Ghostbusters to he's taking over horror essentially at this
He's
point.
in a lot of stuff.
So I thought it was such a great rendition of the book and the series. It definitely, neither visual versions of it recapture what was in the book. Obviously there's a lot of stuff in there that isn't going to translate well to the video world. It's just
like a child gangbang.
Yeah, in the sewer to where she takes what's her face takes everybody's virginities. Yeah, that's
I am the resident Stephen King fan here, so everybody knows.
Yeah, that was a weird chapter there, Mr. King. But yeah, I just thought it was very well done. I thought Skarsgård did an amazing job as Pennywise. He gave it that real creepy feel because Tim Curry, I feel like they're two completely separate entities. It's not.
Oh yeah,
the original one's not scary. It's just a really good, funny, goofier style Pennywise versus this one is like actually horrific. The imagery was great. The scares were on point. And this is where CGI was at its top, where they can recreate some of the stuff that they couldn't have done back then in the 80s and stuff like that. So it's a classic for me. It's a classic story. It's a classic character. So for that reasons, amongst many, that's number 3 for me. So Seamus,
that's a good one for sure.
It's a great movie.
It's a great movie. It never gets old for me. I could pop it on at any point.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the thing is too is like for me, the only reason it's not in my top 10 is because unfortunately, this is one of those situations where I think the book is a lot better than the movie. And even his contributions to the remakes obviously helped them be a little bit more faithful, but it's still not the same as the book. And I guess not the same in a sense that like the book, there's just so much more. There's so much more lore. But I do enjoy that movie. Bill Skarsgård is incredible as Pennywise, and the eye thing that he can do with his eyes and make his eyes like move in different directions. Bizarre. I love that scene, that very early scene where he's like looking at Georgie from the sewer. He's like looking at Georgie, but looking at the audience at the same time.
And
it's
drooling
so good. Yeah, it's so good. So my third, right? My 3. All right, this is the first of my 2 John Carpenters in the list. Another sci-fi horror movie, probably the greatest sci-fi horror movie ever made, and it's The Thing from 1982. Kurt Russell, peak Kurt Russell,
firing on all cylinders,
peak sex symbol, like I'd have his babies style. Kurt Russell. I love this movie. It's so good. The Thing, again, another movie where you never really see the monster, but you don't ever really see the monster. And that's what's so good about it. It creates such a level of paranoia that, you can feel it. You feel the paranoia that the characters in the movie are feeling because you don't know who is the thing, like who is the monster at this point, because it keeps changing and shifting. And the effects in this movie are incredible. For 1982, they still hold up. Not a single effect in this movie can you watch it and go, "Oh, that looked bad. That looks so of the 80s. That looks so old." You watch this movie today in 2024, and it still is incredible when it comes to the effects that they pulled off. Pretty much everything was practical for the most part. There were a couple things I think that were, either animation or some sort of animation at some point, but most of it, if not all of it, was practical effects. It's just so good. Like when the head becomes the spider thing with the little stalks, like that scene's incredible. The scene with the blood and the heated copper, that scene's incredible. It's just amazing. It's one of the most iconic, memorable movies that John Carpenter's ever done. And if it really wasn't for my love of Michael Myers, I feel like this one would be higher ranked than Halloween. Not to give anything away, but it's just that good. It's that good. It's one of those movies that I have to watch all the time. I'm very happy that we got to see it in 35 millimeter when Enzian decided to show it in theaters. So I actually got to see this movie in theaters on 35 millimeter film. Something that I never thought I'd be able to do because this movie came out 6 years before I was born. The fact that I actually got to see it in theaters is another special thing for me too. I love this movie. The Thing will always be in my top 3 forever.
Yeah, it's a classic for a reason.
Mhm.
Maybe one day
Definitely.
we'll get the original Thing as a Horror Nights house. Maybe one day.
Right.
Yeah, maybe one
Maybe
day.
someday.
That
All right,
Poor
Jamie.
prequel sequel thing.
Jamie, number 2.
So this one might be conflicting for you guys, and I was hesitant
Uh-oh.
to put this on the
Well,
list.
you already put
because
Halloween at 6, so I mean,
No.
your whole list is conflicting.
I was talking to my roomie, and she was like, "Yeah, they're gonna talk crap to you if you put this on there because that's not horror." And I said, "You know what? I don't care. I gotta put it on there because I will talk about this movie."
Not only am I
to
going
the
to put
day
it on
that
there,
I
I'm going to put it
die.
at number 2.
I am gonna put it at number 2. I had to. Number 2 for me is gonna be Richard Kelly's absolutely iconic film, Donnie Darko. More of a psychological thriller than a horror. I knew this was going to be debatable, but I asked Nick about it the other day, and he said, put it on there if you want to put it on there. So I put it on there.
I'm going to
So
tell you
I
to
put
change
it
your
on
list.
there.
But
I had to
Well,
put it on
here's the
there.
thing. If it was, I was about to like walk away because I didn't know what was coming. But Johnny Darko, that's I'll
Donnie
give it to you
Darko
because
is one of the best movies ever made.
I will give it to you because I love that movie.
Thank you, Seamus.
Do I think it's a horror movie? No.
No, I don't either.
so-
Psychological thriller, I feel like, falls into the genre of horror, though.
Yeah, psychological thriller is probably the closest thing I'd give it.
Mhm.
I think it is a really good movie. It is a very hard movie to understand and get into. You have to watch it a bunch of times to finally really understand what's going on. But I do agree. I do like it.
Mhm.
At 2, though, I'll let you. You know, you explain your position, Jamie, and I will sit here and listen to you explain your position because that's high. That's really high on a list of top 10 horror movies to put Donnie Darko there.
It is, and I'm gonna stand on this hill. It's okay. My number 1 is definitely more considered a horror movie, so it's okay. That'll count more. But
I know what it is now at this point.
You do exactly. Very, very simple of me. But Donnie Darko, I feel like just dips into that part of your mind that like makes you think and makes you think about the end of the world, makes you think about just what it could possibly be like if you did have only a certain amount of time left on this earth. And I feel like it plays on schizophrenia and it plays on mental health and it plays on things that people deal with in real life and can still make sense like in this day and age and still be relevant. And I feel like that's something that it's hard for me to explain it in a sense just because I feel like I like this movie so much and I've tried to hype it up a bunch and I feel like I don't even have the words to explain it. But I feel like it digs in deeper to a sense of horror or psychological thriller than it does with having jump scares or like scary aspects or like scary images like in the film. Like obviously like Frank is like the creepy bunny, but that's probably the scariest part of the whole thing. But I feel like just the way that it makes you think and just the way that even if you could watch it so many times, I feel like it doesn't have a distinct ending. And I think Richard Kelly wanted it that way too. And even like in interviews and stuff, he never really like explains like the ending of the movie. And I know Nick hates this aspect of it because he just thinks it's so stupid, but I really enjoy it. And even if it's not considered a horror per se, I feel like it kind of gives me that sense of ominous and eerie feeling just with the music that they have and just with the cinematography and with the way that Donnie is. I feel like Jake Gyllenhaal, there's really no one else could have played that role like he did, and just the way that it makes you feel. I don't know. It's really hard for me to explain, but I got to keep it at number 2 just because I love that movie so much. And I feel like even when we go to like these horror conventions and stuff like that and like Spooky and like Spookala and whatnot, when I see Donnie Darko stuff, it's such like a one-off niche thing. And I really enjoy like talking to people about it because I've had this conversation with numerous people saying that even though they know it's not considered horror per se, I feel like it still falls into that realm and into that world of people who do enjoy that genre and can get enjoyment from this movie too.
Yeah. Obviously it's your list, so I'm not going to sit here and shit dog your list. Like that'd be fucked up for me to do.
Nick said I could put it on there, so I asked specifically.
Your list.
First of all, it's your list. Don't think what I think. Who gives a fuck what you think? I don't consider it a horror movie.
Mhm.
And and it's only, if we were doing a top 10 movies of all time for me, this actually may break my top 10 movies of all time, because I do love this movie. I adore this movie. And again, I think it's because this is definitely a Seamus movie. One of those things where it's like, I can be a hoity-toity fucking film snob and nerd and be like, you just don't get it. Like that type of thing. And I apologize for being that way, but that's just how I am. But I do love this movie. I think it is really good. The only really horror thing I can think of is Frank. Other than that, there's really nothing about it that's like,
I feel like
horror.
You could say that about Cloverfield too, and you could say that about 10
I agree with
Cloverfield
you.
Lane and
I
like
agree
other
with you.
movies like that,
100%.
and like any kind of like end of the world sort of
100%.
movies. You could say could
Agree
be
with you. 100%.
Because
To
even
be
with
fair,
go ahead, sorry.
No. You're fine. You're fine. I think for me, like, there's actually 2 other Gyllenhaal movies that I put over this one on a horror list, and neither of which are horror movies. And that one of them is not
Zodiac?
No. Well, Zodiac, I guess. Yeah, I didn't think of Zodiac. Zodiac would be 3. Zodiac would be 1. Nightcrawler, which is nothing to do with horror, but he plays like a nighttime striper guy, whatever. I don't know the actual term, but I don't know I forget what the term is, but he films like bad accidents and violence and shit and sells it to the news stations. That movie to me is more horrific than Donnie Darko. Plus he plays an absolute psychopath in that movie, and it's amazing. It's such a good movie. If you haven't seen it yet, go watch it. Or there's a movie he did with Villeneuve, Denis Villeneuve, called Enemy, which is again not a horror movie, but there's enough elements to it that are horrific to me that like I feel would be more of a horror movie than Donnie Darko. But again, it's your list, so if you feel like it needs to be there, then it needs to be there. I agree with you on everything you said. I agree with you. I just don't consider it a horror movie, I guess is my point.
I had a buffer for my number 2 if you guys want.
And I shouldn't say much because I put Silence of the Lambs and American Psycho on my list. So, I mean,
but those still have horror elements to it too.
They do. But I mean, take what I say with a grain of salt, because
I would say that you could compare American Psycho and Donnie Darko to be almost identical for the genre, except he kills people in American Psycho.
Right. There's more gore in American Psycho than there is in Donnie Darko.
Yeah, for sure.
But equally, but both movies equally
follows that like mental health trope, and
broaches the subject of mental health and how people handle mental health, and the two characters, definitely approach it in different ways. So yeah, I can see where you're coming from. So I definitely will not bad dog the pick. I'm blown away that you put it at 2.
Yeah.
Nick, do you have anything to add to this discussion?
I don't like Donnie
I know you
Darko
don't like the movie. Yeah, I know you don't like it.
I can't stand Donnie Darko. I just that's a whole podcast on itself. That
would be a whole entire discussion altogether.
Not a fan at all.
We'll save that for Popcorn Time Machine.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, exactly. We'll save that for another episode. But yeah, like I said, it's your list. I'm not going to tell you what to not put and what to put. I think it's close enough, in that thriller aspect that it's weird. I wouldn't consider it. I wouldn't consider it strictly horror, but being that it has that supernatural thriller psychological aspect, it's close enough. I think. I think you could probably make the case that. On the other end, Killer Clowns from Outer Space isn't necessarily horror. It's goofy sci-fi, and it's got horror elements. It's kind of one and the same. Get Out, same thing. It's horror, obviously, but it's definitely leaning more towards the psychological.
Wouldn't really consider Get Out a horror movie. It is a horror movie more in the sense of
day,
Donnie Darko.
Oh, see, there you go.
More in the sense of Donnie Darko, but I could see why you would put that in the same kind of more of a psychological.
Similar, but Donnie Darko never did it for me. I hated it. All my friends in high school liked it, and I just absolutely despised it. They were like, "Well, it's just because you just don't understand it." I was like, "No, I get it. It's just a fucking dumb movie."
You don't get it, though.
And the fact that you're telling me and the fact that you tell me I'm a fucking idiot and I don't understand this dumb fucking movie. No, I understand it. I understand movies. I completely get it. I've watched movies my whole life. I went to school for film and video. I've written like many scripts in my day. Like and I'm not saying I could write a better script, but like I can at least understand movies. You know,
It's one of those
I can
films that
comprehend
has you.
movies.
Yeah. But that's the
No,
thing.
it doesn't
like,
make you.
but
It
but
doesn't.
that's the thing that you're saying though, is like you get what it's supposed to mean. It's not supposed to have
And I don't
like a
like it.
distinct like meaning and like a distinct like, oh, this is what
I'm
the
not.
film's about. You're supposed to more
Hey,
interpret the meaning
Sure.
of the film in your
No,
own
she could have
sense.
put Skinamarink too, and that would have really set you off.
That fucking movie. Both those movies, lock them in a vault and just throw away the
But
key.
see, again,
Skinamarink
don't be like that.
wasn't
Because
bad.
here's the thing. Because like,
Skinamarink
I
was
get
good.
it. I don't think anybody should look at someone and go, "Oh, you don't get it." Well, you just don't understand why it's good.
Yeah.
Then, like,
And
fuck
that's
those
what puts
people.
me off
Fuck
more on this
gatekeepers.
movie, because that's
And I get
what the
it. So
majority
don't
of
let
that community
that's
is.
like saying you don't don't like the band Tool because their fans are fucking tools. Like it's like whatever you get from it is what you get from it. And that's the thing about that movie is that it's divisive in that sense that like Jamie and I both like that movie, but I bet you we like it for different reasons. I bet you there's reasons that you may get something, get a certain message out of it that I don't get, and I get something vice versa that you don't get. But we both can equally like the movie. He doesn't understand quite what they're going for, and he doesn't like it because it definitely is kind of out there. So everyone's allowed to have an opinion on it. So
Yeah, I mean,
don't be those people that are like, you don't get it, so you don't understand why it's good. Like no one likes you if you do that. I hate to say it.
I understand it.
I don't hate to say it.
I get the movie. I get what it's going for, and I hate that for a movie. Not my thing. So my number 2, let's reel it back into something we can all agree is a good movie. My number 2 has already been mentioned tonight, and that would be Trick or Treat. This is
number 2. Wow.
Yeah, that's high.
This thing moved up for me. I think I appreciate it more and more as you watch it, because it's one of those movies where, because it is that anthology, you can sort of tune in and tune out, right? If you want to just catch like one aspect or one story, you can watch it for that. If you want to watch it as a whole cohesive piece, you can. I think I've grown to appreciate it more. It's just that Halloween feel, that classic Halloween feel is what I really enjoy. And I think maybe because we're doing the list now, closer towards the like horror season, it's close. You know, I think I'm getting more antsy for that Halloween style vibe, that I'm kind of pushing this a little bit higher, because I'm ready for it. I'm ready for that season, and it's just such a good movie. You talked about it earlier, and I didn't want to talk about it too much then because I knew I had it coming. But yeah, I definitely moved it up my list to. I got to go back and listen to our previous episode when we did this last time, because I'm curious where I had this on my list. I definitely did not have it as high, but it's just. I like those anthology series, and I like when they tie together. For me, if they don't tie together, it takes a steep drop off of my enjoyment. And if they do tie together, it nails it. It increases, tenfold. We watched one of the previous VHS ones, and like I enjoyed a lot of the stories, but it hurt it for me that they didn't tie them together, because then they started to like tie a couple of them together, but not all of them. So it was just like weird. It sort of felt flat, but I thought it was I think they had it queued up to tie together and they just chose not to, or for whatever reason. And that hurt it for me. But when something like this can do what it does and tie it all together, these multiple stories, I like that in all genres. Like, I love Knives Out. I love Bullet Train. Like, I love those like multiple stories, multiple characters, and you have to sit through the whole thing to understand the big picture. And then you could step back, and then it has a whole second rewatch. Not many movies can you watch for the second time and enjoy it better, because you're understanding it more and like seeing how all the pieces actually place together. And then you can notice these little things that were sprinkled throughout the film. Like, I get that now. That makes sense. I get it. That enjoyment level always continues for Trick or Treat with me. So that's why I have that so high, I think.
I'm surprised, because now I can't even think of what your number 1's going to be if Trick or Treat was number 2, because I didn't even think you were going to have it on there at this point. But I feel like that's a good spot for it.
Trick or Treat definitely hid in plain sight for a while. But again, if you look at my list, and we'll do this once we wrap up, we'll quickly run through our 10 through ones very quickly. But it's again, I think a
Quickly.
pretty different film than the other ones. You know, it's a lot different than the others, so there's variety there. So, Seamus, you're number 2.
My number 2. This is where the second of my John Carpenter love comes in, and this is Halloween from 1978. The first one, the best one, really the only one that at the end of the day matters, because this is where really I look at it almost as this is kind of the catalyst for horror movies. I feel like up until this point, horror was kind of a thing people dabbled in. There was movies that had come out even prior to this movie that kind of did the whole horror slasher bad guy stalking people type movie type theme. But this is what perfected it. This is what created a genre. This is what kind of really gave us what the next 30 plus years of horror cinema was going to be. Halloween is it. Michael Myers is the king. He is the greatest horror villain ever created, which is saying a lot because it's literally a William Shatner mask painted white, like super white, and wearing a jumpsuit. But the way that Carpenter filmed that movie, scored that movie, it created an icon that will never really ever be topped, I don't think, by any other slasher ever. I don't think you'll ever come across a situation at this point where something becomes more iconic than what Halloween gave us. I mean, again, I've said it already once tonight. Take the movie we went and saw last night. Like, obviously, a lot of the stuff we get today steals information. Not steals, but is heavily inspired by what John Carpenter did with Halloween. The sparseness of it, the very sparse music, the sparse sound effects. I mean, at this point, it's like people do gore just to do the gore. Halloween had no gore in it. There was no blood. And maybe, well, I shouldn't say no blood. There was a very small little bit, at least what looks like blood. But otherwise, there is no real gore at all in this movie, but it is remembered as the scariest and goriest movie of all time. So I've already waned and waxed and spread nostalgic goop all over this friggin' podcast for 4 years, especially about this particular movie. But I love this movie. It will always be something that I watch regularly through the season. I watched this more than once during the Halloween season because it's just so good. It's just so much about it. There's so many things about it that I think like Jamie was saying when she talked about it, how it just brings back that feeling of classic Halloween. That fall leaves, cold, jack-o'-lanterns, all those things you think about when you think about trick-or-treating and Halloween and everything else. This is what you think of. This is that movie. And it really, it's a simple story. It's incredibly how simple it is. It's incredible how simple it is and how well it worked. I don't know, like they say in the movie, everyone's entitled to one good scare. This movie just leaves you with everything you've ever wanted. I don't know. I love this movie. I'm just rambling at this point. I don't know. And it's not even my number one. That's the crazy thing. Like, this isn't my number one movie of all time. This is just, I don't know. I love Halloween. Thank you, John Carpenter. Thank you, John Carpenter, for making my life what it is.
That's it, the root
the
of
classic. If you think about it, I mean, it's one of the classics.
I'd say that's the root of most people's horror. If you're into horror, that's probably what started it all for the most part. Maybe not with this younger generation because but anyone from the 70s through the early 2000s, like that's what probably
at least
started
for our listeners. If somebody in our listener base came up to me and was like, I've never seen the 1978 Halloween, I'd be like, then why are you listening to our podcast?
Yeah.
Like, how have you never seen this movie?
Yeah. No, it's,
oh my God.
I imagine everyone's seen it, but to like be the kickstart of your love.
Yeah, no, I get it. Yeah.
But all right, so let's get into our number ones.
Number
Jamie,
ones.
Number one.
Boy.
I think you guys probably know what my number one is going
Oh,
to
I
be.
know
at this
exactly
point.
what movie this is.
Unfortunately, do.
It's the very, very coveted in my heart. This movie walked so Smile could run. It's
I
going
see
to
what you did
be
there.
the 2014 film It Follows. And I say that specifically because literally, and it makes me so mad that because Nick doesn't like It Follows, but he likes Smile, because legitimately it's the exact same premise of It Follows, and it just blows my mind because literally in Smile, they're like, yeah, it can look like anyone you want. It could be someone you know, like da-da-da-da, all this kind of stuff. And I'm like, it's like word for word, pretty much what they say in It Follows. But this movie just does it all for me. The cinematography is absolutely stunning, fantastic. The soundtrack is probably one of my favorite soundtracks in any horror movie by far. From Disaster Piece, I have it on vinyl. It's so good, just synthesized, eerie, unsettling music. The thought of the movie, and when this came out in 2014 and when I saw it in the theaters, I thought it was going to be silly because the thought of a demon following you and being passed on by sex, everyone just thought it was like so like goofy and stupid. But the way that they did it, and the unsettling like characters that they used, and the characters that they used that looked like some of Jay's friends in the movie, or that were just one off, like the tall man that they had coming into her room, and that they had the same naked guy on the roof. It was just so weird, but it just lended so well. And it's actually, Seamus does a lot of kind of nods and Easter eggs to Halloween as well. In the beginning of the movie, the girl in the beginning of the movie that's running away from the house, the first girl that we see who has her leg snapped on the beach, is named Annie, kind of a hint from Halloween. And then at the end of the movie as well, when Jay and Paul are walking, it kind of does the shot from behind them, and there's the bushes in the back, and you could kind of see the guy following behind them, kind of like in Halloween with Michael Myers did with Laurie when she was walking home from school. But I will always die on this hill. I know this isn't a very favorite of many people, but I just feel like it has enough of that creepy element and unsettling aspect that the thought of someone that could be following you pretty much throughout the whole point in your expansion of life, I guess, unless you pass it on to someone else. But the fact that they can look like someone you know, that they could be someone like a random person in the crowd, it's just it's a cool concept that they had, especially for that time. I feel like it was something really different, and I feel like it holds up. And finally, now 10 years later, David Robert Mitchell finally announced that we will be getting a sequel to It Follows called They Follow, and Micah Monroe did an interview recently saying that it's supposed to be bigger, scarier, and more over the top than It Follows. So even though I don't specifically think that this movie needs a sequel, I am excited for it with how much love I do have for it. And I'm interested to see what they will do with it. If they're going to, I know Micah Monroe's going to be back, but I'm interested to see if they will begin where they left off in the end of the movie, with that scene I was just talking about, where there's obviously someone still following behind them, even though that they thought they got rid of it and passed it off. It's just, like Seamus said earlier when he was talking about Halloween, I just feel like I'm rambling at this point, but I will always hype this movie up till the day I die. This will always be. I watched it today, actually. I knew Nick was gonna. I had it playing when I get home. He's like, "You're watching It Follows again." It's just such a good like rainy day movie, like something to put on for like background. I always have it on.
Yeah, not a fan.
I have the steelbook.
If you want to hear my thoughts,
Yep, I have I have that poster.
If you want to hear my thoughts on It Follows, check out episode 14 of our podcast when we reviewed that with Kevin.
And I was so mad when they did that and they did not let me be on the episode. I was like, you're literally going to talk about my favorite movie of all time and not let me be on the episode?
I don't know if it was that we didn't let you. I don't
know.
No,
it was
that's
before.
That's on him.
You guys were still getting into it and I was just being a brat.
We were doing killer reviews with Kevin, and that was kind of like the thing for a little bit.
At this point. I can't believe this movie's 10 years old already at this point. But
yep.
Yeah, I mean, you've said it all. This movie, I think it's a good movie. I think it's a great movie. I love how weird it is, and that opening tracking shot, that one shot with her running like from house to house, and it's all one shot. Like, it was a really well done movie. It's unique. You're never really quite sure what time period it's in, because it feels like it's equally 80s, 90s, 2000s, and 2010s, and it just mixes it all together. That
Yeah, it is a really, really weird, good callback to older horror movies.
Yeah.
So
Which
yeah,
I'm curious if
just
they'll
like-
ruin that in the second one. Like, are they gonna
I'm sure they will.
say
So
like
I'm
the
not
time
super pumped
frame
about a
and kind of
sequel,
like,
but
you know, like if just leave
Yeah.
it ambiguous, because you made it a point to like mix things up a little bit. Like
Yeah.
you had different like devices, and like you just couldn't tell by how people dressed and acted and talked what
Mhm.
year or decade this was. Like, are you
And I
gonna
love
ruin it
that.
and come out and say it? Well,
Yeah.
and I don't mind. I don't completely hate that part,
Mhm.
but are you know, do that again. You know, don't
Mhm.
answer the question of what, you know, oh, this is 95 or what, you know, whatever it may be.
Because I think how they were supposed to be, because I was reading stuff on Reddit about it, when in the movie, like the TV, like what they're watching on TV is usually like older stuff, and like the TV's kind of older, but like the way that they dress seems like a little bit more like new age, and just like the different things, like the little like flip phone, like Nook, like little pocket compact book that she has is like really like old school. And it's just, I love that aspect of it too. And just like the little things, like how I think when we had first watched this, Nick, there was like, maybe you said this or maybe I'm making it up, but there's one thing that you notice in this movie, and that I've heard other people say it too, is like, where's the parents like in all this? It's just like all the kids like all by themselves. But then like you could see like in the beginning of the movie when Jay comes in the house like from the pool, like it kind of insinuates that like the mom is kind of like an alcoholic, and like the dad passed away and he's not in the picture, and it shows the family photo, and then you see the mom like at the dinner table like in the background, and it never shows her face, just like with the glass of wine. Or then like they have her later on like talking in the film to one of her friends, but then again never showing her. It's just a lot of little things that like really added up to like make it. And just like the scene where Jay goes to the park and she's swinging on the swing set, and it's nighttime outside and it's really dark, and Greg walks up, and it just gave me Halloween vibes from that scene specifically too. And I don't know, I could talk about this movie all day with how much I love it. But Seamus, what's your number 2 going to be, or what's your number 1 going to be? I'm sorry, the big one. I think I know what it's going to be already. Or Nick,
Well,
I think it's your turn, Nick. Sorry,
It's Nick first.
I
Then
was
it'll be me.
I was so excited, I got off track.
That's fine.
So
That's
my
fine.
number 1 is Seamus's number 2, and that is Halloween,
Okay,
the classic. This one you
Gotcha.
watch all year round. Like this
Mhm.
thing goes on any time of this of the year. It doesn't matter. It's just
Mhm.
nothing that Seamus said I could reiterate enough, but it is just the all-time classic. And it's just so funny because growing up, I feel like me, Seamus, and yeah, there it is. Me, Seamus, and Seamus's brother Sean all sort of gravitated towards one of the other slashers. Seamus was always very Michael Myers. I was very Jason Voorhees, and Sean liked Freddy Krueger. So like we all sort of had our own little thing. And as much as I love the Friday the 13th movies and Jason as a character, I grew to appreciate Halloween more and more and more. And it just has more rewatchability to it for me. It's just, if you want the Halloween vibes, you put on Halloween. So that's, I can't really say much more about it. It's very evidently obvious why Halloween is my number 1. But Seamus, you're number 1.
Yeah.
I
So
know it.
I mean, Halloween. Do you?
I think I do.
Okay. All right. Let's see. Let's see if you're right. So my number 1 is, I think, the greatest horror adaptation ever made, from another source material. It is my favorite author of all time, and it is peak Jack Nicholson,
Ah, I knew it.
and that is The Shining from
Yeah.
1980.
Nice.
This movie is incredible. From the first time I've watched the movie, from the and reading the book for the first time, it is, to me, it is exactly what an adaptation should be. I'm of the mindset that an adaptation shouldn't necessarily be like one for one what you're adapting, but at the same time, it's also so far beyond what you'd expect from an adaptation, especially at the time. Like, a lot of I mean, granted, it was 1980, so like it was early in
in Stephen King's career somewhat, because he had written Carrie, I think, or published Carrie, excuse me. My cat's destroying everything right now because she's an asshole. He had written Carrie in 74, I think, and that movie came out in 77. I don't remember exactly what year that first movie came out, but The Shining was kind of like the first big budget boom, like, hey, we have a massive Stephen King adaptation. And then Kubrick comes out and is just like, I'm gonna do whatever I want. Fuck Stephen King. I don't give a shit what he says. And literally that's what this was. Like, this movie, it diverted so far from the source material that you would think that like this can't be that good, but it is. Like, the book is amazing and Kubrick's movie is equally amazing, to the point where when he wrote Dr. Sleep, which is like the sequel to it, and they made the movie pulled from, and the book pulled from aspects of the original Shining book and the original Shining movie. So it was so iconic at the time, for a lot of people who were fans of the book, but fans of the movie too. The fact that you could pull some of that stuff and feed it into a sequel from both properties and still make it make sense, I don't know. But this movie is just incredible. Jack Nicholson at peak Jack Nicholson, like, amazing in his role. Shelley Duvall, for as much as this movie fucked her career up and screwed her up personally,
Yeah.
she was incredible in this movie. I forget the kid's name, but Danny Torrance at the time, whoever played little Danny Torrance, is really, really good. And then all the, secondary characters. Talk about a movie that's iconic scene wise, like all the scenes in this movie that are just so easily remembered, whether it's the little girls in the hallway with the trike, or the all work and no play makes Jack a dull boy, which, by the way, was not in the book. That entire scene was created for the movie by itself. The maze at the end of it, him being frozen in the maze at the end of it. There's just so many things about it that are incredibly iconic, to the point where like documentaries have been made, not about the making of the movie, but how people interpret the movie. So like, it's not just, hey, this is how this was made. It's, why do I think it was made? What do I think he means by this particular scene or this particular theme or whatever this might be? I mean, some people look at it and go, well, it's just a long-winded confession for Kubrick to say I faked the moon landing. Like, no joke. People believe that this movie is just
why
his
he has
confession.
a rocket ship on his sweater.
Right. It's why he wears the Apollo whatever sweater and this, that, and the other. But it's just, as a horror movie, it's perfect. It is the perfect horror movie. It's the perfect ghost story movie. It's the perfect haunted house movie, even though it's a hotel. Yeah, I don't know. I know I'm rambling, kind of just like speaking out my ass right now, but I think people that enjoy this movie will understand where I'm coming from when I say that it is the be all end all when it comes to the horror genre. I mean, Halloween kind of like kicked off, I think, an entire wave of movies and a wave of where this genre could go. The Shining perfected it. So I don't know. I love this movie. There's nothing wrong with it. I think there's very little anything that I could say bad about it, if anything at all. And I love it. So I really don't know how to end this spiel, but that's kind of how I feel. So I don't know how you guys feel about The Shining.
Yeah,
but
I love
I'm sure
The
it's
Shining.
not.
Yeah.
I don't love it as much as you did. I didn't put it in my top 10. I appreciate it. I do like it. I just don't.
I do
I
too.
feel like I don't go back to it as often enough, and that was kind of one of my criteria for my list, is how much do I actually rewatch these movies, and for that one, it just hasn't been there. But if you want
I may
to
watch it tonight, even though it's like almost midnight.
if you want to listen to us talking about The Shining, we covered that episode. We covered that movie in 2021 back in the day as well. So
we did
a lot of killer reviews back then. So yeah, those are our top 10 lists. Quickly before, because we're pushing 2.5 hours.
Yeah,
so
we're
hopefully you guys
hours.
tuned
Holy
in.
shit! I hope you guys listen to this whole thing.
So let's quickly run through our lists, just 10 through 1. So Jamie, just go through your list 10 through 1, and we don't need to talk about them, and we'll Just
All right.
as a quick fresher.
Mhm. Starting at number 10, I have Us. At number 9, I have They Live. Number 8, Dead Silence. Number 7, Trick or Treat. Number 6, Halloween 1978. Number 5, The Lost Boys. Number 4, Sinister. Number 3, House of Thousand Corpses. Number 2, Donnie Darko. And number 1, It Follows.
All right. And then mine goes as follows. I have Get Out at number 10, Killer Clowns from Outer Space at 9, Paranormal Activity at 8, Halloween 3 Season of the Witch at 7, Freddy vs. Jason at 6, Scream at 5, The Conjuring at 4, It at 3, Trick or Treat at 2, and Halloween at 1.
Mm-hmm.
And that leaves me. So my list is at number 10, Candyman from 1992. American Psycho, The Babadook, Silence of the Lambs, Hereditary, Alien, Saw, The Thing, Halloween, and finally The Shining.
All right. A fun little episode. We haven't done something like this in a
little
while.
episode.
Yeah, we haven't got to talk about like horror movies in a while, so it was nice chit-chatting about some of that stuff. Kind of breaks up the Horror Night season because this is something we'll start doing some more movie related aspects on YouTube and keep the feed more Horror Nights related and break it up that way because I do miss talking just straight up horror movies. So we mentioned a couple of times we saw a movie last night, but I think because it's a Shudder original, maybe we'll save that for we'll get back into Shudder Sundays and we'll film a little special on that. And
oh God,
you
want to watch that again?
No, I will not watch it again, but I will talk about it.
Don't think we really need to. We pretty much got all what we needed last night.
Yeah, seriously.
Very, very simple.
Maybe we'll kickstart our Shudder Sundays back off because we've been slacking there. We've had a lot of other stuff going on. All right. Well, we got Dark Universe stuff coming out tomorrow. Hopefully some more Horror Nights news on the horizon. And thank you for sticking along with us from this longer episode. Hope you enjoyed it. Let us know your top 10 horror movies or even just a couple of your top favorites and tell us where we were wrong and why we're stupid. But that's all we have. Get some of our new Fear and Beer merch. You can purchase it now on our TeePublic site. Get it in time for the Horror Night season so you can look cool in the fog. But until next time, this is Nick.
This is Seamus.
This is Jamie.
Happy haunts.
It's cursed. It's got a death curse. You know, it's Halloween. I guess everyone's entitled to one good scare.
And again, I would just like to thank Vampire Stepdad for letting us use his music for our intro and outro music. So if you would, just go check him out. Spotify, Facebook. Again, that is Vampire Stepdad.